Chapter 25:16. After expressing his gratitude, the apprentice of the Utopia faction flew to the swordsman and took his storage bag. Then he took out his own elixir and swallowed it. Then he stood in the air and adjusted his breath slightly. Seeing that the disciple of the utmost happiness faction took the storage bag, Xiaohua curled his lips and raised his eyebrows somewhat helplessly. He muttered, "Although a fly is small, it's still meat." The second opponent of Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and Xiao Mao's group of three was a sixth-grade swordsman who had just killed another cultivator. Seeing the three of them flying over, he laughed nastily and was about to activate his flying sword. At the same time, the swordsman felt a stinging pain in his head. However, the swordsman suddenly came to his senses and immediately activated his secret technique to resist Xiaohua's soul stab. Go to hell. Xiaohua activated his yang leaf fan and a fire dragon rushed over, wanting to surround the swordsman. The swordsman naturally wouldn't allow himself to be captured without a fight. He activated his sword light and rushed toward the fire dragon. However, Xiaohua's fire dragon was too powerful. The fire passed through the sword light and almost burned the swordsman's body. The swordsman was alarmed and was about to activate his sword energy to extinguish the fire again when he saw a piercing immortal whip and a magic whip attacking from the left and right at the same time. The swordsman only had time to block the piercing immortal whip before the magic whip pierced his throat. When the swordsman fell in midair, Xiao Mao very nimbly rushed over and grabbed the storage bag in one hand. Then, with a wave of his hand, the flying sword that fell in midair also flew up. Ha! As expected of the surname Xiao. Xiaohua laughed loudly. The actions of Xiaohua and the other two were immediately seen by several swordsmen. They looked at each other and activated their magic weapons together to fly toward the three of them. The swordsmen were all 5th grade and 6th grade swords. Their flying swords were extremely sharp and the sword light was also of various colors and shapes. Some condensed into thin thorns, some condensed into raindrops. There was even a swordsman whose flying sword turned into the thickness of a pillar and stabbed toward the three of them from several directions. Li Zongbao took a deep breath as usual and was about to wave the piercing immortal whip again. At this time, Xiaohua laughed in his ear and said, "Senior brother Li, don't be anxious." Immediately, Xiaohua raised his hand and several inconspicuous yellow talismans flew out. "Big brother, are you sure?" Even though Xiao Mao had great trust in Xiaohua, when he saw that Xiaohua actually used a yellow talisman to defend against the enemy, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. However, seeing the numerous yellow talismans gradually transform into a ball of fire, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of several hundred feet actually surged into the ball of fire like a hurricane, and an indescribably terrifying aura was emitted from the ball of fire. Not to mention Xiao Mao, even the swordsmen were greatly shocked. Fortunately, one of the swordsmen came to his senses quickly and shouted, "Let's go!" As he spoke, he was about to activate the flying sword that had already pierced into the fireball in preparation to escape. Rumble! No one had ever seen such a huge fireball talisman before. Like a blazing sun, it exploded beside several swordsmen. An incomparably hot flame rushed toward Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, and the two of them were pushed back more than 10 feet by this flame. After the flames subsided, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at the place where they were just now. The previously arrogant flying swords had already been blown away, even if they were scattered in the distant stone wall. At this time, they could see that the quality of each flying sword was different. Some had many cracks, some had no brilliance, and the most miserable one had already been broken in two. Looking at the several valiant and high-spirited swordsmen, they were now blown to a corner of the karst cave. The sword light on their bodies was slightly swaying, and their faces were pale from the lingering fear and the serious injuries of their primordial spirits. "Kill!" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao shouted in unison, and each of them flew towards a swordsman. Xiaohua waved his hand and took advantage of the eruption of fire spiritual energy from the fire talisman. A fire dragon rushed towards a cultivator, and he himself rushed towards another injured cultivator with the wishful steel staff in his hand. The sound of these fire talismans hidden under the yellow talismans was really loud. The residual sound of the explosion was like thunder rolling in the karst cave. The swordsmen and cultivators in the karst cave couldn't ignore it even if they didn't want to. When they saw Li Zongbao whipping a 5th-grade swordsman until his skin and flesh split open, Xiao Mao throwing the universe ring and smashing a 6th-grade swordsman's brain, and that thin and tall Xiao Hua, who they had never seen before, smashing a 5th-grade swordsman's chest with his club. Furthermore, beside these 3 swordsmen, there was another swordsman who was screaming from being burned. No matter how hard they tried, the sword light on his body was unable to block the bone-like flames. How could they not be astonished? The cultivators of the Utopia faction, Taibai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley were all in high spirits, and many sword cultivators were extremely angry. They all wanted to get away and kill these 3 extremely cruel cultivators. Of course, they each had their own opponents, and only the swordsmen near Xiao Hua and the others could be mobilized to besiege them. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao didn't have the slightest ripple on their faces when they saw close to 10 swordsmen surrounding them. Xiao Hua's methods were really too many. Not to mention other things, just this fire talisman alone was the first time they'd seen it, and its power was so great, so what if a few more came? Unfortunately, the fire talisman was Xiao Hua's secret item. He took out a few just now just to test its power. There were so many cultivators and swordsmen here. If Xiao Hua used too many, he would definitely be exposed. So Xiao Hua, who was hiding behind Li Zongbao, took out the soul-absorbing bell again. With a loud clang, only 2 of the 10 swordsmen swayed. They tried their best to resist for a moment, but they still fell from midair. The remaining 8 swordsmen's sword light flickered faintly. Although each of them had astonishment on their faces, they all resisted the soul-absorbing bell's soul-absorbing technique. Damn it! This thing is getting more and more useless. Xiao Hua was very helpless. He put the soul-absorbing bell and the toad into his space. With a touch of his hand, he took out the yang leaf fan. The 8 swordsmen urged their sword light, but they were somewhat hesitant. After all, their opponent actually had a soul tool. They had experience fighting soul cultivators, and they were afraid that Xiao Hua would have some soul technique that they couldn't guard against or some inexplicable fire talisman like before. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was delighted. He hurriedly transmitted a few words to Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao nodded expressionlessly. The immortal piercing whip in his hand shone with a yellow brilliance, and a row of whip shadows smashed towards the 3 swordsmen in front of him. Xiao Mao was somewhat hesitant, but he still obediently urged the universe ring in midair to trap the 2 swordsmen in front of him. Xiao Hua's figure swayed, and he actually rushed to the front for the first time. With a wave of his left hand, he still used the universe ring in the sleeve, and the yang leaf fan in his right hand flashed again, courting death. The 2 swordsmen in front of Xiao Hua were 6th-grade swordsmen. Seeing Xiao Hua recklessly challenge them first, they both sneered. One of their sword light flashed, and in a flash, it split into 3 and stabbed toward Xiao Hua in a shape. The other swordsman's figure flew up, and both of his legs kicked out. Sword light actually burst out from the swordsman's legs, setting off a whirlwind that rushed toward Xiao Hua's fire dragon. Seeing the 3 sword lights fall into Xiao Hua's sleeve, the swordsman only laughed nastily. Explode! The 3 sword lights collided with each other, and like fireworks in the sky, countless tiny sword lights streaked across the sky, blooming like dandelions. In the eyes of that swordsman, he seemed to have seen the sword lights pass through Xiao Hua's arm, pass through his Taoist robe, and even pass through his body. However, reality was always crueler than fantasy. He saw Xiao Hua's Taoist robe cover, and a powerful force was born, enveloping an area of a few feet. An inexplicable imprisoning force came from the space, and in an instant, that swordsman lost contact with his flying sword. That swordsman's face turned ashen. Although he didn't know why this imprisoning force was so strong, he had an intuition in his heart that this imprisoning force seemed to be different from the ordinary ones. Seeing Xiao Hua wave his arm and easily catch the flying sword that he was so proud of, as if he was pinching a firefly, the swordsman's figure didn't hesitate. He immediately turned around and fled, wanting to escape as far as he could before his primordial spirit was damaged. Xiao Hua saw that this swordsman was actually so decisive, and was also slightly surprised. This kind of swordsman who could pick up and let go was rarely seen before. Which one of them didn't stubbornly pester and hope for a fluke? In the next moment, Xiaohua didn't crush any sword light and directly put it into the space. What kind of flying sword could be exchanged for how many spirit stones? Xiaohua probably knew better than anyone else. He wasn't willing to waste it. Of Xiaohua's two opponents, one ran away as soon as they met face to face. The other one wanted to run, but he was relatively unlucky and was trapped by Xiaohua's Yang Leaf fan. That fire dragon not only entangled his flying sword, but also turned into a wall of fire that surrounded him all around. The hot flames on the fire dragon gradually swallowed the sword light, causing him to constantly urge his sword origin to resist. Seeing Xiaohua turn his head to look at him, that swordsman's heart was hoodwinked, and he actually somewhat trembled. Who would have thought that Xiaohua only glanced at him, and his figure suddenly flew to the side. The Yang Leaf fan in his hand disappeared, and a pitch-black stick appeared. He raised his head and struck at one of Xiao Mao's opponents. Ha! Although Xiaohua's wind escape technique was only at the elementary level, it was extremely flexible in this karst cave. In the blink of an eye, he floated to the side of the swordsman. The swordsman was urging his sword light to deal with Xiao Mao, and was quite caught off guard. He couldn't help but be surprised. He opened his mouth, and his small life source sword drew a sword mark, stabbing towards Xiaohua's face. The sharp sound of the wind on the tip of the sword seemed to cut the air. However, when the head of the wishful steel staff strangely fell and hit the small sword with great precision, the strength of the wishful steel staff was like the tongue of a poisonous snake, causing the swordsman's heart to tremble. He couldn't care less about the flying sword that was stabbing towards Xiao Mao, and hurriedly urged his small life source sword. Of course, he was also too late. Although the small sword was as flexible as a fish, and although the small sword was made of extraordinary materials, the wishful steel staff was a fish hook, and the wishful steel staff was a divine thunder falling from the sky. With a pes sound, it hit the small sword. With a crisp kacha sound, the defensive sword light on the small sword was immediately annihilated with the arrival of the wishful steel staff, and the small sword was smashed into pieces. Looking at the swordsman again, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body trembled violently, and his face was pale. His eyes were filled with the incomprehension and fear that all swordsmen who encountered Xiaohua had. Then, the shadow of the black stick flashed, and the swordsman didn't know anything. Chapter 25:17. After killing the second swordsman, Xiaohua took his storage bag and flying sword and roared, "Give me your life." The wishful steel staff smashed towards the swordsman who was fighting with Xiao Mao. The swordsman had seen Xiaohua's power and was already frightened. Seeing Xiaohua attack him again, he hurriedly urged his flying sword to block Xiaohua, who knew that Xiaohua's wishful steel staff had only hit a few feet in front of him. Once again, it strangely floated and rushed towards the swordsman who had just escaped from his firewall. Help! The swordsman had just escaped from the firewall and was rejoicing. When he saw Xiaohua rushing towards him like a demon, he couldn't help but shout. Although he shouted and tried his best to urge his flying sword, the flying sword was somewhat vulnerable under Xiaohua's wishful steel staff. Kacha! The flying sword was broken, followed by a poof. The swordsman's head was also broken. Following the fall of the swordsman's corpse, the swordsman that Xiaohua had just let go also fell from midair. The swordsman had urged all the sword energy in his body to meet Xiaohua's staff, who knew that Xiaohua would leave without any symptoms. The swordsman was stunned and didn't withdraw his flying sword in time, or rather, he didn't have any intention of withdrawing. But his opponent, Xiao Mao, was not stunned. The heaven and earth ring was used in time, taking advantage of Xiaohua's feint to trap the swordsman. At this point, Xiaohua and Xiao Mao had completed their task. As for Li Zongbao, facing two swordsmen of the 5th level, although it consumed his magical power, it was not a problem. Then Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao were still in front, and Xiaohua was behind. The three of them steadily advanced. Most of the swordsmen behind them were about the 4th level. Under Xiaohua's soul stab, the swordsmen were repeatedly hit. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao easily took their lives. As for the small number of swordsmen who were not afraid of Xiao Hua's soul stab, they also became ghosts under Xiao Hua's staff. Of course, except for Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, the other disciples of the Utopia faction, Taibai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley did not know that it was Xiao Hua's soul stab, but when they saw Li Zongbao flying at the front, they all cheered and shouted, "Senior brother Li is good." Even a few disciples of the Utopia faction who had escaped from the fight also lined up beside Li Zongbao and joined the three of them in killing the sword cultivators. When the three of them arrived at the entrance of the karst cave, there were no surviving swordsmen in this area. There were over 100 cultivators surrounding them. Seeing the entrance of the karst cave, some of the disciples couldn't help but look in the direction of life. Their eyes flashed with hesitation. That's right, they didn't have a chance before, but now that they were faced with a choice, they couldn't help but weigh the pros and cons in their hearts. When Xiao Hua saw this, he sneered in his heart. Just now, he had just casually pointed his finger and didn't think too much about it. Who knew that when things came to a head, he actually discovered that his finger really did have a mystery. Li Zongbao also noticed this. He raised the celestial destroying whip in his hand and said coldly, "I'm going to fight my way in. Anyone who still thinks he is a disciple of the Utopia faction and wants to be a disciple of the Utopia faction should follow me into the Utopia faction. After this battle, all of you will be meritorious. I don't need to say anything. Even when you return to the Utopia faction, you can enjoy the rewards with peace of mind. Naturally, anyone who doesn't want to be a disciple of the Utopia faction can leave now. I won't force you." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Zongbao took the lead and rushed towards the swordsmen who were beginning to gather in the distance. "Kill! We are all cultivators of the Dao faction. Follow Senior Li Zongbao and kill the enemy." Xiao Mao took the opportunity to shout as well. He held the whip in one hand and the heaven and earth ring in the other as he stood side by side with Li Zongbao. Naturally, Xiao Hua didn't say anything and quietly followed behind them. "Kill. I'm familiar with Senior Li Zongbao. Even if I die here today, I can explain to Master. If I run away, I can't bear to part with my junior sisters of the Utopia faction." A short, wretched old man with triangular eyes and a goatee chuckled. He pounced forward and held up a magic weapon that looked like a pipe in his hand. "Not bad, not bad." Another tall, middle-aged male cultivator clapped his hand and a sparkling flying sword appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "My dual cultivation partner is still waiting for my news in the Changbai sect. If she hears that I'm a deserter, what will she think? This Shua would rather die here and break her heart than let her look down on this Shua. Let's go, let's go. I also want to compete with the swordsmen in terms of flying swords." An old male cultivator held a black iron sword in his eagle claw-like hand. He actually called himself Young Master and chased after them. Immediately, nearly 40 cultivators followed Li Zongbao and the other two and charged into the battlefield again. They charged towards the front where blood and death were intertwined. The other 60 disciples were mostly disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and the Changbai sect. They hesitated for a moment and looked at each other. Another 40 disciples waved their hands and charged in bravely. They caught up with Li Zongbao and the others and looked at the last 20 disciples. Their eyes were full of unwillingness. At this moment, a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator with a face as white as jade whispered, "Do you all remember the purpose of coming to the Flowing Ice Valley this time?" When the other disciples heard this, their faces were filled with ecstasy. A female cultivator with a large scar on her forehead said hurriedly, "Yes, yes, we came to the Flowing Ice Valley to spy on the strength of the swordsmen. We didn't have to attack the Flowing Ice Valley. Li Zongbao is not part of our team this time," the white-faced cultivator said coldly. "His cultivation is high and he can freely enter and exit the Flowing Ice Valley, but we can't. Moreover, he is fond of grandiose achievements. In order to become the strongest person below the Golden Core stage, he likes to kill sword cultivators. His purpose is different from ours today." Yes, Li Zongbao doesn't know the purpose of this place at all. He only joined later. The female cultivator said hurriedly, We will return to the Sky Patrol City and report the strength of the sword cultivators in the flowing ice valley to the conference hall. Then we will have completed this mission. In addition, we can find other helpers on the way. Let's go! Before the female cultivator finished speaking, another male cultivator suddenly flew out of the karst cave and said coldly, "I'm here to contribute to my Dao sect, not to sacrifice my life for Li Zongbao's reputation. I only listen to the orders of the conference hall. Li Zongbao is not our leader. I have no reason to listen to him." Then, the 20 people did not say anything else and flew away with a clear conscience. Of course, whether they could fly out of the flowing ice valley, whether they could fly back to the Sky Patrol City, and whether they could complete their mission as they said, no one would know. Xiaohua did not pay attention to this place at all. Everyone had their own fate and each person had their own choice. Just like the Cool Breeze Valley cultivator he met earlier, Xiaohua did not care at all. His attention was now on the swordsman in front of him. There were many swordsmen in the karst cave. There were definitely more than 10,000 of them. Xiaohua and the other two were like a drop in the ocean. Even with the dozens of people who came with them, they were far from being a threat to them. What Xiaohua wanted to do was to kill the enemies as soon as possible and instill fear in the hearts of these swordsmen. Just like his fierce reputation of the terrifying phoenix, the swordsman would retreat without a fight. In just a few breaths, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao encountered swordsmen in front of them. Just like before, Xiaohua secretly attacked. After the sneak attack was successful, Li Zongbao would attack. If they encountered a difficult opponent, Li Zongbao would activate his magic power, or Xiaohua would attack forcefully. Xiao Mao's magic power was slightly weaker, so he only dealt with opponents that he was confident in. The outstanding performance of these three people naturally made the dozens of people who followed them excited. They also lined up behind the three of them, forming a sharp knife shape, and stabbed towards the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators who were entangled. Xiaohua hid behind Li Zongbao. Seeing that the morale of the crowd was high, he was also happy. When he saw other cultivators fighting against the swordsmen, he also used the soul stab from time to time. Most of the time, it was successful. However, these cultivators did not know that it was Xiaohua's credit. They all cast grateful gazes towards Li Zongbao. Gradually, more and more cultivators and swordsmen noticed the situation on this side. Almost all the places where Xiaohua and the others passed by, the swordsmen were killed by them together, and the cultivators also merged into their torrent. Just like the river water of flowing ice valley, Xiaohua and the others were the drop of snow water of Shuiyu Mountain. Gradually, as they flowed through the ice field, more and more snow water mixed in, and this snow water became more and more, and also became a trickling stream. And the drop of snow water in front of this stream was incomparably hot, incomparably red, and all the coldness and ice layers could not block its sharpness. All the ice turned into flowing water under its magic power. Therefore, this stream became even bigger, and many little drops made an ocean, and it actually became a torrent. Of course, Xiaohua was enduring silently. Of course, Xiao Mao's cultivation was relatively shallow. Of course, Li Zongbao's glory was unparalleled for a time. However, at this time, no one would treat Li Zongbao as a person, and no one would ignore Xiaohua and Xiao Mao. This was because the three of them were a small team, and Xiaohua and Xiao Mao had been fighting together from beginning to end. At this time, Li Zongbao was not alone, but three people. Perhaps in the past, Li Zongbao claimed to be the #1 gold core cultivator, but from today onwards, after this battle in Flowing Ice Valley, the title of the special team of the conference hall would replace Li Zongbao's previous reputation. Kill, Li Zongbao roared, and the immortal piercing whip lashed out again. Although it didn't bring about too many whip shadows, he didn't seem to be worried about the might of the immortal piercing whip. With a loud bang, the whip shadow collided with the huge sword light, and this sword light was like a mountain. Boom! Immediately after, another fiery light flashed by, and Xiaohua's yang leaf fan rushed forward. The fiery light covered the sword light that was missing a piece from the immortal piercing whip, and crazily swallowed it. Xiaohua's fiery light had just stopped for a moment, and Xiao Mao's universe ring flew over again, and fell down smoothly. The sawtooth inside the ring made a strange sound, and the huge sword light was ground into pieces. Chapter 25:18. Behind the three of them, a Taibai sect disciple raised his flying sword. With a flash of sword light, the yellow flying sword was smashed into pieces. The flying sword of a sixth-stage swordsman was destroyed by three people. Naturally, because of the appearance of Xiao Hua, Xiao Mao, and Li Zongbao, the cultivators of the Taoist sect were once again united. Of course, the sword cultivator also joined forces. The destruction of the flying sword of the sixth-stage swordsman was only a small part of the confrontation between the swordsman and the cultivators. However, this small part also represented the current situation of the battle. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had gradually gained the upper hand. Compared to the cultivators, these swordsmen seemed to know more about the techniques of war. Seeing that the situation had changed, the dozens of disciples of the Void Heaven Sword School had already tacitly occupied the advantageous terrain. Each of them urged their fellow swordsmen to hold their flying swords in their hands. When the cultivators led by Li Zongbao arrived in front of them, everyone shouted in unison. Dozens of flying swords flew out and condensed into a huge flying sword. "Disciples!" Li Zongbao also shouted, urging the disciples to meet the battle. The swordsmen had been preparing for a long time. At this time, they attacked to catch the cultivators off guard. The disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction were obviously not as well trained as the swordsmen, so how could they make it in time? "Senior brother Li, junior brother Xiao, help me." Seeing this, Xiao Hua immediately shouted and flew out, waving the wishful steel staff to meet the huge flying sword. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had finally gained the upper hand. If they couldn't block this sword, all their previous efforts would be in vain. "Help you?" When Li Zongbao heard this and saw Xiao Hua take the initiative to fly out, he was bewildered. He really didn't know how to help Xiao Hua. However, he had always known Xiao Hua's ability and boldly guessed that the culprit who killed Tu Hong was Xiao Hua. He felt that Xiao Hua would be able to block the joint attack of dozens of swordsmen. Xiao Hua's shout was just a cover. "Ok." Li Zongbao hurriedly flew up and hurriedly gave Xiao Mao a look. Xiao Mao also hurriedly flew up. The two of them had the same idea and the same action. One of them urged the magic weapon to attack the flying sword, while the other patted Xiao Hua's direction. From the looks of it, they were using some kind of joint attack secret technique that no one knew about. Sure enough, as the two of them raised their arms, Xiao Hua's entire body was enveloped in flames that soared into the sky. The flames were extremely dazzling. Not only did it block everyone's gazes, it also greatly disturbed their divine senses. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. Xiao Hua's wishful staff hit the huge flying sword. Even though Xiao Hua let out a strange cry of "ouch," and his entire figure flew back like a flying sword, charging straight into the distance, the combined attack of several tens of shining swordsmen had actually been mostly dissipated by him. The sound was the sound of the collision between the wishful steel staff and the flying sword. The sound was almost earth-shattering, shaking the entire cave. Furthermore, the huge shockwave before the collision had stirred up the heaven and earth spiritual chi in an incomparably chaotic manner. It spread through the entire space in all directions. Not only were countless stones falling from the special stone walls of the karst cave, but the deafening sound also made all the cultivators and swordsmen dizzy. These three people are too powerful. Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao's magic weapons collided with the huge flying sword. Naturally, they were not its opponent, and their figures flew back along with Xiao Hua. Everyone looked at the three people who were knocked back, and then looked at the sword shadow that had almost dissipated. They all gasped. Especially the swordsmen, they knew the power of their joint attack of the flying sword. Without the strength of a second-grade illusory sword, it was impossible to do it. Kill! While the cultivators were shocked, the disciples of the Utopia faction were also ready. Dozens of disciples who were also closest to Li Zongbao urged their magic weapons at the same time, and together, they smashed into the flying sword. Buzz, buzz, buzz. There was a burst of golden sounds, and the remaining flying swords were forced to fly back by the joint attack of the disciples of the Utopia faction. Many of the flying swords were even broken. Attack, seeing that they had obtained victory, the other disciples also roared, and one after another, they took out their magic weapons and magic weapons. With a rainbow-like momentum, they rushed toward the swordsmen who were somewhat flustered with a tide-like attack. Just as mentioned before, the situation on the battlefield was too delicate. Xiao Hua's attack seemed to have scattered the swordsmen's last stubborn defense, their last persistence, and their last pride. At the same time, it also sounded the horn of victory for the cultivators. If these experienced swordsmen organized a few more times, they might be able to turn the situation around. However, when they saw the cultivators launch another attack, they chose to be defeated after panicking. Of course, it was also because these swordsmen had battle experience that they knew that the situation was hopeless, and so they fled. A defeated army was like a landslide. This was exactly the case. Not to mention third-grade swordsmen, even sixth-grade swordsmen would hastily step on their flying swords and flee. Fortunately, there were a lot of stalactites in this karst cave space, and there were even more karst caves of various sizes. The flying speed of the swordsmen was also extremely fast. Although they were chased by the cultivators from behind, the swordsmen still maintained a straight posture. Damn it, why isn't anyone helping me? Where did all those junior sisters go? Xiao Hua shook off the water droplets on his body and stood up from under a stalactite. His gaze looked at the utmost happiness faction and Tai by faction disciples who were chasing further and further away, and he shouted angrily. He was truly sent flying by the swordsman's flying swords, and his back crashed into who knows how many stalactites. Heh, how about little brother help you? Xiao Mao's voice sounded not far away. He and Li Zongbao merely borrowed the momentum to fly backwards. How could they compare to Xiao Hua? Even if they crashed into the stalactites, that was also an act. Tisk, forget it. Do you have jade hands again? Xiao Hua clapped his hands, took out a few jade bottles, and threw them to Xiao Mao. You'd better hurry up and take these pills. The magic power in your body has long dried up, right? Haha, little brother can't compare to big brother. Xiao Mao took a few pills without hesitation and handed the jade bottle to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao still had a cold face. He took the bottle, sniffed it with his nose, frowned slightly, and then looked at it a few times, poured out a pill and swallowed it into his stomach. Then his eyebrows slightly relaxed, and he looked at Xiao Hua even more thoughtfully. After taking the pill, Xiao Mao whispered, Big brother, the senior brothers of the utmost happiness faction have already flown far away. Should we hurry over? Damn it, if you want to go, you go. Xiao Hua waved his hand. How much magic power do you have to consume? Anyway, I don't dare to go. Xiao Mao seemed to wake up from a dream and said with a smile, Yes, little brother understands. You have to do things in moderation. Too much is as bad as not enough. If we can show off our invincible power again, big brother, I'm afraid it'll be hard to explain. What's hard for me to explain? Xiao Hua curled his lips. Haha, big brother, after this battle, your name will be known throughout the entire Sky Patrol City. Xiao Mao gave a thumbs up. That shocking strike just now. It's really powerful, that's dozens of bright swordsmen. Alas! Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face immediately became long, and he looked at Li Zongbao, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Senior brother Li, this is all thanks to you, your secret joint attack is really powerful. I'm just a brute force, and I only borrowed the magic power of senior brother Xiao Mao and junior brother Xiao Mao. This strike doesn't deserve any credit from me. It's all thanks to senior brother Li. Yes, Li Zongbao's expression didn't change, and he nodded slightly. What credit do you have? It's all mine. It's me who brought you to Flowing Ice Valley, and it's me who taught you the secret joint attack. Furthermore, the attack just now was also the result of my magic power transforming into physical strength. Great! Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, In this world, only senior brother Li knows my heart. However, even if I admit it like this, in the eyes of some people, there are still some problems. Li Zongbao reminded Xiao Hua with a rare flash of worry in his eyes. Alas, I know. Xiaohua looked up at the crowd that had already disappeared and sighed. But if I don't do it, senior brother Li will be the first to disagree. I won't disagree. Li Zongbao shook his head. I will only fight to the death. Not only will I disagree, even big brother won't agree. Xiao Mao said with a grin. He was in an extremely good mood. His cultivation was the weakest among the three of them, and it had always been Xiaohua who took care of him. Today he and Li Zongbao had cooperated extremely well. Not to mention killing countless sword cultivators, even that last wave of their hands at the same time seemed to be telepathic. They had really helped Xiaohua a great deal. Moreover, the three of them had limitless glory today, and 30% of it was his, Xiao Mao's, share. In the entire Xuanyan school, there probably weren't many who could catch up to him, right? Let's go. We'll go see Martial Uncle Xie Hui and the others. Li Zongbao said with a wave of his hand. Senior brother Li, are you sure? Xiaohua hurriedly advised. That's a battle between golden core cultivators. Can you afford to get involved? I can't afford to get involved, but someone else can. Li Zongbao said coldly. Martial Uncle Xie Hui is my martial uncle, and also the main instigator of the Feather Immortal Gathering. He's been good to me, so I can't not help him. Damn it, I knew it. That day you came to the Utopia faction in a hurry, so that's why. Xiaohua said helplessly as he flew up. At that time, I didn't know you were Martial Uncle Xie Hui, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to go to the 7 Extremes Mountains. Li Zongbao retorted. Forget it. What else could Xiaohua say? Li Zongbao had already said so much, and he was almost dragging Xiaohua along. But, senior brother Li, Xiaohua still exhorted. My magic power is now exhausted, and I still have to rely on senior brother's secret technique, and I still have to rely on senior brother and junior brother Zhao's help. I know. Li Zongbao was a little impatient. Every time I see your magic power exhausted, and every time I see you recover the fastest. Don't worry, the cultivators of the Utopia faction are all responsible, and we won't forget our righteousness at the sight of profit. Hearing Li Zongbao say, responsible, Xiaohua's expression became a little gloomy. Obviously, he was mocking the irresponsible Qian Mo of the Imperial Thunder sect, who only treated the Imperial Thunder sect as a big sect, who only showed the style of a big sect, but didn't have the strength of a big sect. Chapter 25:19. Xiao Mao also looked at Xiaohua sympathetically. He wasn't a famous disciple in the Xuanyan school, but in the meeting hall, he was protected by Gao Wei. But Xiaohua, cough cough. Li Zongbao suddenly said in a low voice, actually, the Utopia faction values the disciples of other sects very much. His voice was very soft and even a little hesitant. Xiaohua heard it and felt warm in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but laugh. Needless to say, Li Zongbao's master, De Sun, wanted Li Zongbao to say these words to Xiaohua. Li Zongbao had obviously guessed that he was the culprit behind Tu Hong's death, but he still said these words. However, this sentence was quite rebellious. Li Zongbao couldn't say it clearly, so Xiaohua just pretended that he didn't hear it. There were many caves in the karst cave space, and the directions were also very complicated. Xiaohua's divine thought and Buddhist sense couldn't go very far. In such a place, he was already confused. But Li Zongbao was much stronger than Xiaohua. With just a glance and a slight sniff, he quickly found a path that was different from many cultivators chasing after the swordsman. Seeing that there were no bloodstains or corpses on the path, Xiaohua was a little surprised. He couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Senior brother Li, how did you know? Tu Hui's whereabouts? Is it some kind of secret art of the Utopia faction? Xiaohua was sincerely asking for advice. After all, he was too weak in this aspect. If Li Zongbao really had some kind of secret art, maybe he would be thick-skinned and ask for advice. Who knew that Li Zongbao's words would make him stunned? Nothing else, just intuition. Well, Xiaohua shrugged helplessly. He knew that Li Zongbao was telling the truth. It seemed that Cui Hongshan had some strong points in this aspect. Li Zongbao had been flying for more than half an hour. Seeing that there were two forks in the road, Li Zongbao began to hesitate. But at this moment, a deep and obvious rumbling sound came from the cave on the left. Li Zongbao was stunned. Boom! Quick! Li Zongbao heard the sound and was anxious. He held the fairy whip in his hand and rushed to the cave on the left. When Xiaohua saw this, he did not dare to be negligent. He urged the wind escape technique and instantly overtook Xiao Mao. He followed behind Li Zongbao while holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. After flying for another half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua's keen senses picked up on the minute changes in the heaven and earth spiritual qi. The dense water-type heaven and earth spirit qi became increasingly overwhelming, and the faint restriction within the cave also emitted a faint blue light. Oh, the spirit stones produced by flowing ice valley are water-based? Xiaohua's brows twitched as he came to a realization. In his mind, the scene of rows and rows of light blue water-type top-grade spirit stones appeared. Damn it! Xiaohua secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and shook his head with all his might, as if he wanted to shake this tempting scene out of his mind. Nonsense. The spirit stone mine in Flowing Ice Valley had been occupied by sword cultivators for many days, and it was different from the spirit stone mine in Gale Snowfield. How could there be so many spirit stones left here? Xiaohua wasn't just indulging in wishful thinking. Besides, with Li Zongbao following him, how could he have such an opportunity? What? Li Zongbao suddenly turned his head and looked at Xiaohua very strangely. Nothing. Xiaohua shrugged and was about to speak when the dense heaven and earth spirit qi suddenly flowed, as if there was a huge suction force in front of them. Li Zongbao obviously also sensed it. He did his best to urge his flying technique, and his figure sped up a bit. You can't be like this. Xiaohua's divine sense swept out, but unfortunately, it was still blocked by the cave. He muttered, and his figure couldn't help but slow down when the three of them flew into another karst cave. They unconsciously stopped. They saw that this was a space that was only slightly smaller than the previous karst cave where they were fighting. Inside was a vortex of heaven and earth spirit qi from before. Countless hurricanes blew from all directions of the karst cave and poured into the center. In that space, two white-haired old men stood upright in midair. Xiaohua's divine sense swept out, and he felt that the protective brilliance around the two people were flashing with sword light. The sword light was incomparably sharp, as if it could cut through his divine sense. Changbai sect. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed, and he immediately knew that they were the Changbai sect disciples who came to attack Flowing Ice Valley together with Tu Hui from the Utopia sect. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect, Martial Uncle Li. Li Zongbao stopped in midair and transmitted his voice. He is an extremely honest cultivator. Teeth, what does being honest have to do with me? Xiaohua disdained. His enmity with the Changbai sect was huge. Not only did the Changbai sect's nascent soul cultivators want to kill him, but he also wanted to kill the Changbai sect's golden core cultivators. Facing such a sect's golden core cultivators, how could Xiaohua attack? Hearing Xiaohua's reaction, Li Zongbao was expressionless. At this moment, the two old men, who were as sharp as swords, moved. In front of one of the old men, a 10-feet-long flying sword vibrated violently. The runes on the flying sword flowed crazily, like countless tadpoles looking for their mother. And with the movement of these runes, thousands of tiny vortexes appeared on the 1-foot-wide sword. Not only did the vortexes emit tiny sword rays, but they also sucked in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the surrounding 10 feet. And as the spiritual qi of heaven and earth poured in, the blue brilliance on the flying sword became even brighter. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect. Xiaohua did not know much about the flying swords of the Taoist sect and sword cultivators. Seeing the flying sword being used like a magic weapon, he naturally recognized that this old man was Li Feiyu. Li Feiyu was facing a swordsman who looked very similar to him. Although he was wearing a sword outfit, which was very different from Li Feiyu's Changbai sect Taoist robe, who would notice the Taoist robe and sword outfit in the flashing sword light. Disdain appeared on the swordsman's face. He waved his hand and a similar blue brilliance condensed in midair. In an instant, it also transformed into a 10-feet-long and 1-foot-wide flying sword. It was actually similar to Li Feiyu's flying sword. However, there were no runes flowing on this flying sword. The entire flying sword was a kind of azure blue. The sword rays were like flickering blue lights. They seemed to be stagnant in the flying sword, but they were flowing extremely quickly. Li Feiyu saw the other party's flying sword taking shape and narrowed his eyes. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Qin Mu Ming, eat my sword." As he spoke, the big sword followed Li Feiyu's wave and moved slowly in midair. Every time the big sword moved, there would be a rumbling sound, as if the big sword was breaking through the air. "Li Feiyu, you and I have fought for so long and I am tired of it. Today, I will let you see the true essence of my sword cultivation. I will also let you know that imitating a cat to draw a tiger will never become a tiger." As he spoke, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword made a strange turn and flashed in midair. It gave out a terrifying sword hum and charged straight at Li Feiyu's big sword. If you compare them separately, the flying swords of sword cultivators and the flying swords of Changbai sect are really similar. Even Li Feiyu and Qin Mu Ming have the same temperament. But when these two flying swords meet, they are different. Yes, the essence is different. It was rare to see a Changbai sect disciple using a flying sword to fight a sword cultivator disciple. Xiaohua's eyes lit up as he watched attentively. Li Feiyu's flying sword gave off a majestic aura. Wherever the sword light passed, it was like the wind blowing through rotten wood, sweeping away all the spirit energy of heaven and earth. On the other hand, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was filled with sword lights. That huge sword was made up of countless sword lights, and each sword light was a tiny flying sword. Although his flying sword didn't have the imposing aura of Li Feiyu's flying sword, not only was the flying sword extremely sharp, the sword light seemed to be able to cut open the void. Even the spirit of each sword light could be seen on the spirit of a sword cultivator. Not to mention that the sword will of Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was like the gurgling flowing water. This blue flying sword was like the river water of flowing ice valley. Even though it was extremely soft, it still had the unyielding will to split the towering valley apart. With a boom, the two flying swords pierced into one place. Xiaohua released his divine sense and saw clearly that Li Feiyu's flying sword had an imposing aura. The moment it touched Qin Mu Ming's flying sword, it immediately shattered all the sword light on the flying sword. The entire flying sword that was formed by the sword light was struck and collapsed. Li Feiyu's flying sword seemed to have sunk deeply into the sword light. However, after a few breaths, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword showed extreme flexibility. The tenacious power of water was born from the sword light. Not only did it maintain the shape of the flying sword, it also slowly recovered one sword light after another. It supported Li Feiyu's flying sword and then slowly retreated. And when the two flying swords reached a balance, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword suddenly emitted a brilliant brilliance. It was like a spirit snake that had awakened from hibernation and jumped. Like a big mouth, it quickly swallowed Li Feiyu's flying sword. Not only that, the small sword light that was formed by the flying sword ruthlessly pierced into Li Feiyu's flying sword from all angles. In just the blink of an eye, pieces of stains appeared on the flying sword. There was even a faint crack that appeared on the flying sword. Wang wang, the sound of the sword rang. Not only was Li Feiyu's sword light flashing, even Qin Mu Ming's sword light was flashing frequently. Seeing this, Li Feiyu's expression suddenly changed. He narrowed his eyes slightly and his body flashed with rapid magic power fluctuations. The true essence in his golden core was instantly extracted and turned into magic power that surged into the flying sword. With a crisp sound, it seemed to be the sound of Li Feiyu's arm or the sound of a certain part of the flying sword. The flying sword suddenly stretched forward and a sword light rushed out from the flying sword. It actually tore a small hole in Qin Mu Ming's sword light and was about to pierce Qin Mu Ming's chest. Pooh! With a soft sound, Qin Mu Ming's left arm moved slightly and another sword light streaked across. It was neither fast nor slow and extremely accurate as it hit the sword light. It immediately shattered the sword light. Chapter 25-20. Hiss, Xiaohua took in a cold breath when he saw the situation. This Qin Mu Ming can even give birth to sword light on his arm. It seems like He already has the feeling of transforming into a sword. Li Feiyu might not be his match. Just as this thought appeared in Xiaohua's mind, he saw Qin Mu Ming laughing heartily. His empty hand clenched into a fist and smashed towards Li Feiyu. However, sword light also flickered on that fist as though this fist was the sword light itself. Li Feiyu was naturally not afraid of this. His other hand also formed a spell and a blue shield light appeared in midair, blocking the front of the fist. With a crisp crack, the fist was really like a sword light stabbing into glass. That shield light transformed into flowing light and fell down. Just as Li Feiyu waved his hand and numerous shield lights appeared again, suddenly, a pure blue sword light that was about the thickness of a thumb suddenly appeared from the flying sword that was swallowing Li Feiyu's sword light. It was the flying sword that had stabbed into Li Feiyu. Crack, crack, crack. It was actually similar to the sound of the shield light shattering. An extremely deep crack actually appeared on Li Feiyu's flying sword from this sword light. Ah? Pre-celestial heavy water. This flying sword of yours is refined by pre-celestial heavy water? Li Feiyu was astonished. This flying sword was his natal magic treasure and he could acutely sense the abnormality of Qin Muming's flying sword. At the same time, his primordial spirit was also damaged. Why would Qin Muming answer him? That sword light rapidly shrank and pierced towards Li Feiyu's huge sword again. Whoosh! Brilliance flourished around Li Feiyu's body and where his magic power surged, the huge sword was rapidly retracted. Furthermore, it was gradually shrinking. Just as that huge sword escaped from the range of Qin Muming's sword light, Li Feiyu's figure flashed past and actually flew towards the other side of the karst cave. Behind him, a shield light that was several yards big suddenly appeared with a wave of his hand. Where are you running to? Qin Mu Ming had hit the enemy in one move and shouted out loudly. His body also slightly distorted as he chased after Li Feiyu like a wave. The shield light that Li Feiyu had struck out was instantly shattered by him, and it was only delayed by a flick of a finger. Although Li Feiyu wasn't fleeing in the direction of Xiaohua's group, Qin Muming's spiritual sense had long sensed their arrival. However, Qin Muming only coldly swept his gaze over the three of them. His figure flashed several hundred feet in front of Xiaohua's group. He didn't attack the three Dao sect disciples who were in the late foundation establishment stage. Motherfucker, why don't you do it? Li Zongbao scolded angrily in his heart. When he saw Xiaohua watching the battle with interest and not going up to help, he knew he didn't want to make a move. If Qin Mu made a move, Xiaohua would definitely make a move, but Qin Mu didn't care. Although that was what Li Zongbao thought, he didn't dare to do it himself. When Qin Muming's figure disappeared into the karst cave, Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Then, he took the lead and flew to the back where Qin Muming and Li Feiyu were fighting. Big brother. Xiao Mao was behind Xiaohua. When he saw Li Zongbao rushing inside without thinking, he couldn't help but worry. He transmitted his voice. That sword cultivator Qin Muming is extremely powerful. I'm no match for him. Big brother, can you do it? Yes, it's not a big problem. Xiaohua blinked his eyes and said, "What's wrong?" This Qin Muming is also from the Void Heaven Sword School. He seems to be Qin Jian's junior. Xiao Mao said embarrassedly, "I feel that. The three of us actually have designs on Qin Jian." It's a little crazy. Yes, just the two of you is a dream. Xiaohua said with a smile. With Big Brother, that dream might come true. Yes, I understand. However, Big Brother should be careful. This sword cultivator's attack power is too strong. Changbai Sek's martial Uncle Li's flying sword is already powerful enough, but he still can't defeat Qin Muming. Yes, Big Brother knows. You have to be careful too. Xiaohua nodded. After this battle, you will become famous. This name must stay in the hands of the living. Yes. Xiao Mao's heart felt warm. He really didn't expect that the call of Big Brother from decades ago would change his fate. The fate in this world was too wonderful. Woo, boom, a violent tremor shook the cave. A helpless and low voice faintly came from the distance. How dare you, Martial Uncle Jie Hui? Hurry, Li Zongbao heard and hurriedly urged. He also flew over. But Xiaohua saw that Li Zongbao was in a hurry and had already flown in front of him. After passing through several caves, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He saw that this was a blue space that was about a few li in size. There were fist-sized flashes on the stone walls. These flashes immediately attracted Xiaohua's attention. "Martial Uncle Jie Hui. Zongbao is here to help you." Li Zongbao followed Xiaohua in. His gaze was different from Xiaohua's. After sucking in a breath of cold air, he hurriedly shouted. In the center of this space, a giant wolf was emitting a threatening aura. It was holding a demonic weapon that looked like a halberd. It was pouncing towards a short and thin cultivator with gray hair. That cultivator was holding a magic weapon that looked like a horsetail whisk. That horsetail whisk had tens of thousands of threads that were flashing with a golden brilliance. Every thread seemed to be an extremely sharp sword. Woo, with a muffled sound, the giant wolf's halberd plunged into the light dust. The sharp horsetail whisk extended its antennae like a sea anemone and blocked the halberd. However, the demonic weapon's boundless strength suppressed the horsetail whisk. Not only did the horsetail whisk flicker, even Chu Hui's body was smashed down a few feet. However, below Jie Hui was another giant with an almost naked upper body. In his hand was a mace. This giant was actually a few times bigger than the one Xiaohua saw before. Even the mace was a few times bigger. This giant waved the mace and smashed it towards Jie Hui, who was falling down. Although there was still a distance of several zhang between them, the sound of the wind from the mace and the huge wave of qi rushed towards Jie Hui's legs. An unconcealable sense of crisis immediately made Jie Hui's body tremble. It was already difficult for the demonic weapon to block the giant wolf. This time, the brilliance of the horsetail whisk trembled again. Hearing Li Zongbao's voice, Jie Hui panicked. He didn't even have time to look at Li Zongbao. He tried his best to circulate his magic power. While his body was barely able to fly upwards, he shouted, "You rushed here. Quickly leave, this is not a place you can come." When Li Zongbao saw that Jie Hui was in danger, he panicked at first. However, when he looked carefully, his heart calmed down. He had seen a lot of how Xiaohua bullied others along the way. Moreover, he knew how powerful Xiaohua's wishful staff was. Dragging Xiaohua over was the wisest decision. "Junior brother Xiao, we will use our secret technique." Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua, whose gaze was already lingering on the top-grade water-type spirit stone, and urged him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Oh yes." Xiaohua reluctantly moved his gaze away from the spirit stone's brilliance. He swept his gaze and said with a smile, "Senior brother Li, if the three of us chase that giant away, we should be able to save martial Uncle Jie Hui, right? Naturally, the three of us will chase the giant away." Li Zongbao emphasized the words, "the three of us," as if to make Xiaohua feel at ease. "Let this young master see who is stronger." Xiaohua waved the wishful staff in his hand. His body slowly flew up, and he shouted at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, "Senior brothers, help me." "All right." Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao waved their hands in extreme boredom. At the same time, they waved their left hand and waved it towards Xiaohua's back. In their right hand, the piercing immortal whip and the universe ring were also brought out. Each flashed brilliantly as they smashed towards the giant. When the giant saw that his mace was unable to hit Jie Hui, and that there were actually 3 little foundation establishment stage insects coming over, he immediately looked up to the sky and roared. Dragging his mace, he took the initiative to rush towards Xiaohua and the others. At this time, under this secret technique of Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, Xiaohua waved his wishful staff and flew over. Woo! The giant's mace made a soul-stirring sound as it struck towards Xiaohua's wishful staff. That huge mace was almost the same size as Xiaohua. Although the mace had not yet approached, the suffocating sound of the wind was almost enough to send the tall and thin Xiaohua flying. Moreover, the strange sounds coming from the spiked club were also faintly shaking Xiaohua's soul. "Granny, this giant is really more powerful than before." Xiaohua's soul not only had the secret technique of soul cultivation, but also a soul armor obtained from a sword cultivator. Although the quality was not high, it was better than nothing. The entire dark cloud shook slightly and became extremely stable again. Dang! The mace and the wishful staff collided. A wave of air that was even larger than the explosion of the fire talisman was produced from the two people, rushing rapidly in all directions. Even the giant's body that was bigger than a stalactite staggered with the impact. The mace in his hand was lifted high, almost falling out of his hand. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure also rushed out with the wave of air, but Xiaohua's figure was like a swimming fish, drifting slightly in the wave of air. It was a very clever reason for the wave of air to be like a horsetail whisk, rushing towards the giant while shouting, "Fight!" Ah! The giant was stunned. The slight numbness in his arm dissipated and he had to wave his mace again. At this time, before Xiaohua's wishful staff hit, Xiao Mao's Qingkuan ring and Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip also broke through the wave of air and flew in front of the giant. Xiao Mao's Qingkuan ring aside, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip was famous among the cultivators. It was unknown how much swordsman's blood had been spilled on it. However, the giant didn't care about this famous magic treasure at all. The giant didn't even try to dodge the whip that was like a golden dragon. However, when the whip hit, the giant's shoulder shook as if he was trying to reduce the power of the immortal piercing whip. Perhaps it was some kind of secret technique. In short, a faint yellow light flashed on the giant's shoulder and caught the immortal piercing whip. Moreover, the force of the rebound surged and the immortal piercing whip shook slightly in the air. Chapter 25-21. Li Zongbao was dumbfounded. He knew that although his magic power was exhausted, the Holy Whip was a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. How could it be so weak? Looking at Xiao Mao's Heaven and Earth ring, it was even weaker. It also hit the giant's back, but the giant didn't even bother to shake it. The Heaven and Earth ring was like a tickle to the giant. He slid on the giant's shiny back and flew up into the air again. Just as Li Zongbao was dumbfounded, he felt a moment of trance. Then, a chill came from his heart, and an irresistible tyranny came out from the chill. Attack! Almost at the same time as Xiaohua, Li Zongbao flew up and grabbed the immortal piercing whip with one hand. At the same time, his other hand took out a pill and swallowed it. A hot aura came from his meridians. The immortal piercing whip let out a roar like a dragon. As Li Zongbao waved it, the runes on the immortal piercing whip began to move. It broke free from the immortal piercing whip's shackles and turned into a golden torrent. It rushed into the air and rushed towards the yellow giant's back. Dang! There was another sound. Unsurprisingly, Xiaohua's body flew up again, and at the same time, the giant's body was hit by the wishful staff and took 2 steps back. At the same time, the golden light of the Holy Whip broke through the airwaves from the 2 weapons and hit the giant's back. Oomph! The giant let out a deep sound from its nose. Its back shook slightly, and another wave of yellow light flashed. Bang! The golden light of the Holy Whip scattered the light, but the golden light of the Holy Whip was also annihilated. Looking at the back of the giant, there was a faint trace of blood slowly appearing. Old man, eat my whip again. Seeing that the Holy Whip didn't work, Li Zongbao's body glowed again, and he was about to activate his magic power again. Senior Li, use the secret method to help me. Xiaohua saw the coldness in Li Zongbao's eyes and hurriedly shouted. At this time, Xie Hui had enough strength to deal with the giant wolf alone. He always paid attention to the movements of Li Zongbao and the others. Seeing that Li Zongbao was about to fight, he hurriedly shouted, Li Zongbao, calm your mind. It seemed to be a secret technique of the Utopia faction. Xiaohua didn't feel anything when he heard the voice, but it was like a thunderclap in Li Zongbao's ears. Li Zongbao was shocked, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Then, he waved his hand and took back the celestial piercing whip. Senior Martial Brother Li, quickly use your secret technique to help me. Xiaohua shouted hysterically, this old man is too powerful. All right. Li Zongbao silently waved the piercing fairy whip. At this time, the brilliance of the piercing fairy whip was not as arrogant as before. Instead, it was as light as the wind. At the same time, Li Zongbao waved his left arm. Xiaohua's figure soared into the sky and the staff in his hands smashed down. Old man, eat my staff. Woo, the staff carried a strong wind and smashed down like a mountain. Ding ding dang dang, there was a burst of chaotic sounds. Xiaohua's heavenly staff technique was unleashed. He was like a fish in water under the wolf-tooth staff. On one hand, he used the heavy wolf-tooth staff to hit the giant. On the other hand, he could use the power of the wolf-tooth staff to counterattack the giant. Although the giant's technique of using the wolf-tooth staff was perfect, and even the control of the power of his arms was unparalleled in the Dawn Rain continent, he encountered Xiaohua, a cultivator who was the nemesis of giants. What was the result? In just half a meal's time, the giant's bones were soft and his muscles were numb. The yellow brilliance of his body gradually flashed frequently. Hee, this giant with illusory sword cultivation is nothing more than this. Xiaohua sneered. He suddenly raised the wolf-tooth staff and shouted, "Eat my staff again." You are. When he heard that Xiaohua's surname was Xiao, the giant's face changed greatly. It seemed that the matter that had been uncertain for a long time finally had an answer. He waved the wolf-tooth staff and dragged it backward. He no longer paid attention to the crowd. He spread his feet and fled into the depths of the karst cave. The twisting buttocks and the fear of turning back in panic were not much different from the previous giants who were scared away by Xiaohua. Seeing that the giant had escaped, Li Zongbao was about to urge Xiaohua to chase after him, but Xiaohua trembled slightly in midair. His arms hung down weakly, and he sat cross-legged in midair. Obviously, he was exhausted. Sigh, forget it. Li Zongbao knew that Xiaohua was exhausted again. He sighed and looked at Xie Hui. Without the threat of the giant, Xie Hui was able to deal with the beast cultivator with the giant wolf easily. However, at the same time, the weakness of a Dao cultivator's weak body was exposed. Although he urged his magic power and used the power of magic to block the demonic weapon, his forehead was still sweating. He was even more limp and numb than Xiaohua. Even when he was flying, he was still panting. Looking at the giant wolf, although it was moving slower, its momentum was still as strong as a rainbow. Every time it attacked, it would try to get close to Xie Hui. Needless to say, how could Xie Hui dare to let the giant wolf get close to him? He used his horsetail whisk and magic arts from time to time to block the demonic weapon, the Sky Piercer halberd. At the same time, he also used the confinement technique and the fireball technique. However, the giant wolf seemed to be guarding against Xiaohua. It didn't dare to get too close to him. It only destroyed Xie Hui's magic arts and slowly approached him. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xie Hui sighed and looked at Li Zongbao and the others. His body floated up and flew towards the karst cave opposite of Li Zongbao. At the same time, he took out an elixir and swallowed it. Roar! When the giant wolf saw that Xie Hui was actually escaping, it couldn't help but roar. The Sky Piercer suddenly left its hand and stabbed towards Xie Hui's back. The sharp sound of the wind made it impossible for Xie Hui to not turn around to face the enemy. It was also at this moment that the giant wolf tilted its head and spat out two huge wind blades from its mouth. It charged aggressively towards Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. This guy actually didn't dare to provoke Xiaohua, who had his eyes closed. However, it wanted to target Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. The wind blades stirred the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the air and became bigger and bigger. The sharp wind blades cut through the air and made a strange sound. It sounded like the sobbing of an abandoned woman or the sobbing of the night rain. You're courting death. Xiaohua, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. He waved his hand and seemed to be forming some kind of seal. Along with a wave of spiritual energy, a stream of primordial water sprayed out from the top of Xiaohua's head like a fountain. The moment the primordial water appeared, it immediately turned into turbulent waves and quickly covered the entire karst cave. Splash, the clear sound of water splashing could be heard. It was as if a small fish had jumped out of the water and was wagging its tail happily. A wave of water splashed out from the surging waves, blocking between the wind blade and Li Zongbao. The extremely sharp wind blade seemed to be able to cut through the void. However, when the wind blade silently entered the innate primordial water, not even a drop of innate primordial water appeared. Not even a bubble could be formed, and it immediately disappeared without a trace. The giant wolf originally didn't care. Although Xiaohua's primordial water quickly blocked the space, he only thought that it was because of the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, when the wind blades silently disappeared, his face slightly changed and he hurriedly swept out with his spiritual sense. However, when his spiritual sense came into contact with the primordial water, he immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and shouted in shock, "This is primordial water?" However, even though he reacted quickly, a trace of his spiritual sense was still swallowed by the primordial water. How is this possible? The giant wolf's eyes turned and looked at the seemingly endless primordial water gushing out and covering the surrounding space. Even where his eyes could see, there were faint illusions in every drop of primordial water. He couldn't help but groan. That's right, other people would only have a few drops of primordial water, or even one drop. However, they would use the primordial water to stimulate the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth. How could they be as extravagant as Xiaohua? Every drop of primordial water was the real primordial water? Looking at Xiehui, he quickly waved his horsetail whisk and forcefully blocked the giant wolf's sky piercer. Then he saw an azure brilliance like the Milky Way hanging upside down in front of him. He was immediately shocked, but he was also lucky. He knew that this was definitely not the doing of the giant wolf. He hurriedly turned to look at Xiaohua and the others. When he heard the giant wolf scream, he hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and didn't even look at the primordial water. This primordial water was even more useful to cultivators. In a situation where he didn't have any defensive measures, he definitely wouldn't provoke this primordial water. Since you didn't even leave when I asked you to, then don't leave. Xiaohua sneered. The hidden Buddha Saraira waved a Buddha seal and the surging primordial water suddenly boiled, shooting out giant wolves from everywhere. Ha! It's just primordial water. Why should I be afraid? The giant wolf's heroic spirit soared to the sky. He waved his sky piercer, and like Xiaohua's wishful staff, it formed a temporary safe space around him, blocking all the splashing primordial water outside. Xiaohua didn't refute at all. He gradually urged the primordial water to separate the giant wolf and Xiehui, while he and Li Zongbao were separated in another place. Li Zongbao frowned, but since the entire primordial water was controlled by Xiaohua, it didn't matter where Xiaohua was. Sure enough, Xiehui stood in midair for a moment and understood Xiaohua's intention. After a short rest, he urged his spiritual power and threw the horsetail whisk in his hand. The horsetail whisk turned into a comet and shot towards the giant wolf. Dang! The horsetail whisk collided with the halberd. Although the horsetail whisk looked very light, it contained the spiritual power of Chu Hui, an early gold core stage cultivator. Once it collided with the halberd, it immediately emitted a strong brilliance, causing the halberd to stagnate for a moment. There were only a few strands, and each strand had rushed into the weak spot. Ha! The giant wolf roared and waved the sky piercer, cutting off the threads of the primordial water. However, at the moment when it was cut, a few drops still fell into the defense of the sky piercer. Chapter 25-22. The giant wolf hastily moved his body. However, Chu Hui's horsetail whisk came again. The giant wolf had no choice but to wave his Fang Tian halberd again. Just as he was distracted, the drop of innate primordial water landed on his feet. A series of sizzling sounds rang out, and black light and light smoke appeared on the giant wolf's feet. However, this light smoke was unable to withstand the Xiantian true water, and was instantly corroded. After a short while, the light and smoke finally disappeared, and the giant wolf's eyes flashed with shock and pain. Then, the giant wolf looked around and felt regretful. If it wasn't for the killing intent in his heart, he would have escaped from this karst cave a long time ago. At this moment, the innate primordial water had trapped him, and the young man who controlled the water was on the other side. Even if he wanted to kill the young man, it would be impossible. Just now, he was thinking about how to kill Chu Hui. Now, he was thinking about how to escape. The giant wolf was a beast cultivator. However, he didn't have Li Qingshu's protective talisman and he didn't have the hands of a nascent soul realm cultivator. Facing Chu Hui's attack and Xiao Hua's innate primordial water, he was helpless. After Chu Hui disturbed him a few more times and a few drops of innate primordial water corroded his body, the giant wolf's eyes flashed with desperation. Wu, the giant wolf, raised his head and howled. His body started to emit a black brilliance and light smoke. When the brilliance covered him, a giant wolf shape appeared in midair. Before the innate primordial water landed, the giant wolf opened his mouth and spat out a black pearl the size of a thumb. As soon as the pearl appeared, it stirred up a huge gust of wind. However, the gust of wind only raged within the innate primordial water. Once it touched the innate primordial water, it turned invisible. The gust of wind stirred around the giant wolf shape and supported the innate primordial water. Although the innate primordial water was slowly pressing down, it was able to maintain the giant wolf shape and prevent it from being corroded. Oh! Although Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, he wasn't too surprised. He still formed a Buddhist seal and urged the innate primordial water to attack the giant wolf's gust of wind. As for Xie Hui, he looked a little embarrassed. However, he also used his horsetail whisk to hit the wind again and again. Boom! Under the joint attack of the two, the giant wolf could no longer endure it. Its slight hesitation was also shattered. The thumb-sized pearl suddenly exploded, and an awe-like hurricane was formed from the pearl, piercing straight into the primordial water. Oh! This time, Xiaohua was truly astonished. That hurricane seemed to have materialized. It was sharp and extremely fast, piercing through the innate true water that he had set up. Moreover, the tail of the hurricane, where it was rotating, was also rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded into a hurricane passage that was several feet wide. Roar! The giant wolf let out a low roar, and its body flashed with light. At the same time, it rapidly shrank and rushed into the hurricane passage. Xiaohua hurriedly activated his true water and tried his best to shatter the passageway. However, this hurricane passage was abnormally tough. Although Xiaohua had shrunk the passage by a bit, it was still impossible to shatter it. Damn it! At this time, Xiaohua was also regretting. He had placed the giant wolf and Xie Hui together while he hid in another place. The path that the giant wolf rushed out of was in the opposite direction of him. If he was close, he could have used the wishful staff to kill the giant wolf. Unfortunately, he was not close. Open! Xiaohua shouted. He saw that the innate primordial water near Xie Hui had a crack that led to the outside of the karst cave. Xie Hui really wanted to use his horsetail whisk to hit the giant wolf's tail. When he saw that, he immediately activated his magical treasure and rushed out of the innate primordial water. He rushed in the direction that the giant wolf had flown out of the innate primordial water. He wanted to stop the giant wolf before it rushed out of the innate primordial water. However, he was still too slow. When he caught up with it, the giant wolf had already rushed out of the innate primordial water and rushed into one of the karst caves. Xie Hui did not hesitate. He did not even turn his head and chased after it. Looking at his speed, he was still faster than the giant wolf that had lost its inner core. If there were no accidents, killing the giant wolf would not be a problem. Seeing that Xie Hui had chased after the giant wolf, Xiaohua waved his hand and activated a spell. The innate primordial water was slowly sucked into the innate primordial water. Big brother, Xiao Mao saw that the azure innate primordial water was slowly decreasing. He quickly said in a low voice, "What is it?" Xiaohua replied, Is this really innate primordial water?" Xiao Mao hesitated. "But is it useful to you?" Xiaohua did not answer and asked directly. "And yes," Xiao Mao said honestly. "Little brother has a water attribute body. Master has a magical power that can only be cultivated by absorbing innate primordial water. Little brother has been looking for the whereabouts of this innate primordial water. I did not expect." Xiaohua nodded. "How much do you need?" 749 drops, Xiao Mao replied in a low voice. After all, this was a huge number. His master said that he only needed 7 drops to learn the magical power, And Xiao Hua nodded. He knew clearly that most of the magical powers on the Xiaoyu continent had 6 as the limit. The water magical power taught by Xuanyan actually had 7 levels. It was obviously not bad. Where is your magical weapon? Xiao Hua pointed with his finger. A thin stream of innate primordial water flew out and landed in front of Xiao Mao. Here! Xiao Mao was overjoyed. He quickly took out a square jade bottle. Xiao Hua saw this and his expression did not change. The thin stream of innate primordial water slowly fell into the jade bottle. After a while, the thin stream of innate primordial water stopped. Xiao Hua said, "This is 98 drops. Take it back and give it to your master." "Yes, thank you, big brother." Xiao Mao's face was filled with ecstasy. He quickly took out a strange yellow talisman and pasted it on the jade bottle. A yellow light flashed and the jade bottle returned to its normal appearance. Xiao Mao carefully kept it in his storage pouch. "Big brother Li, do you want it?" Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao with a smile. "I don't have it." Li Zongbao swung the immortal piercing whip in his hand. Golden light shot out in all directions. "I only need this immortal piercing whip." Sigh, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. He kept all the innate primordial water into the clear water bottle. "Xiao Hua." Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua and suddenly said, "I'm afraid you have too many tricks up your sleeve." "You must not have too many tricks up your sleeve." "Thank you, big brother Li." Xiao Hua bowed and said, "I know what I'm doing." And although Li Zongbao said, "An," he shook his head slightly and said, "I have to reconsider your words." "Haha, big brother Li, do whatever you want." Xiao Hua laughed and said. Then he looked at the direction Xie Hui went and asked, "Do we still need to chase after him?" "No need." Li Zongbao said indifferently. That beast cultivator spat out his inner core and exploded it. What other tricks can he have? If martial uncle Xie Hui can't even deal with this? As he was speaking, he saw a divine perception sweep over from afar. It was Xie Hui who flew over excitedly. "Greetings, martial uncle Xie Hui." Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to be slow and hurriedly bowed. "Get up." Xie Hui waved his hand. He didn't have the attitude of a senior and hurriedly returned the greeting. "I still have to thank you today. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to kill Liang Qi. I would have been lucky if I could have escaped safely." "I don't dare." Xiao Hua still had some impression of Xie Hui. He smiled apologetically and said, "It's all martial uncle's credit. I don't dare to take credit for it." "Hee, little friend Xiao, that day in Taiching Sec's Hao realm, I already knew that you would have great achievements in the future. Today, I see that it's true. It's only been a few years. Not only have you reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, your methods are also very powerful. You scared the giant away with great strength and even used a rare method to force the wolf cultivator to explode his inner core. This, even my Zongbao can't achieve this." When Xiao Hua heard this, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Martial uncle is overpraising me. It's all thanks to martial brother Li Zongbao. If he didn't have the secret technique, I wouldn't have been able to combine his and Xiao Mao's magic power. I wouldn't have been able to have such great strength. That was a giant with the strength of an illusory sword. I wouldn't have fought it head-on." Hee. When Xie Hui saw Li Zongbao's expression, he smiled and extended his hand. In his hand was a storage pouch. He passed it to Xiao Hua and said, "This is Liang Qi's storage pouch. It should belong to little friend Xiao." No need." Xiao Hua looked around at the supreme great spirit stones and said with a smile, "It's great that I have this." Xie Hui passed the storage pouch to Xiao Hua and said, "Take a look at it first." Oh, Xiao Hua was stunned. He took the storage pouch and scanned it with his divine thought. He smiled and said, "So this giant wolf didn't fight for nothing. The spirit stones inside should have been collected in the flowing ice valley. You can take it." Xie Hui waved his hand and said, "If I take it, I will feel uneasy. How about this?" Xiao Hua waved his hand and took half of the water-type spirit stones and the sky piercer. He smiled and said, "The demonic weapon is useless to martial uncle, so I'll take it." The rest are martial uncles. If martial uncle didn't fight with this wolf cultivator, I wouldn't have been able to kill him. Alright. Xie Hui didn't decline anymore. He took the storage pouch and looked at Li Zongbao worriedly. He said in a low voice, Zongbao, success depends on the celestial piercing whip. Failure depends on the celestial piercing whip. This celestial piercing whip is a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. Your cultivation level hasn't reached that level yet. Don't use it by force. If the celestial piercing whip backfires, you will have a hard time. Yes, I understand. Li Zongbao bowed and said, Master has already given me the secret technique. It should be able to restrain the celestial piercing whip's backfire. Sigh, that senior brother Hengfeng of mine. Sometimes he is too headstrong and cares about his face too much. Xie Hui sighed and said, You have to know that those who are too headstrong break easily, while those who are soft will never be defeated. Sometimes, you can't be too headstrong. Li Zongbao was silent. He didn't reply like before. All right, Chu Hui shook his head slightly. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He tilted his head slightly as if he was listening to something. Immediately after, joy appeared on his face and he hurriedly said, Cool Breeze Valley's Su Bo actually killed Black Phoenix Sword Sex LV Jing. Right now, he's teaming up with Changbai Sex Li Feiyu to hunt down Void Heaven Sword Sex Qin Mu Ming. This old man chased away that unknown giant and killed Gorilla Mountain's Liang Qi. Once this old man and the two Dao friends kill Qin Mu Ming, our Dao Sex Flowing Ice Valley battle will be a great victory. That's right, what about the battle between the Foundation Establishment cultivators? Chapter 25-23. Only then did Chu Hui remember those Foundation Establishment disciples. Alright, senior uncle knows. We will also win. Li Zongbao replied without hesitation. Great! Chu Hui clapped his hands and said, You all can return for now. After we kill Qin Mu, I will send you a message. With that, Chu Hui's face was filled with joy. He executed his flying technique and flew in one direction. Let's go! Li Zongbao took a look and flew back to the karst cave. Tsk tisk. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and smiled apologetically. Senior brother Li, there are so many supreme-grade spirit stones here. Don't you, hee, you can harvest as much as you want. Li Zongbao raised his eyebrows and stood in midair. I will wait for you here. All right. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Xiao Mao, go. Xiao Mao heard and quickly flew to the front of the stone wall. However, no matter how fast he was not as fast as Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had already taken out his wishful staff and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. Xiao Mao knew that time was tight and did not dare to delay. He also took out his universe ring and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. However, when he had just harvested 2 spirit stones, he realized that something was wrong. It turned out that other than the spirit stones on the surface, there was nothing deeper. Even when he smashed a few feet with his universe ring, it was still empty. Xiao Mao hurriedly raised his head. Just as he was about to shout, he saw Xiao Hua's gloomy face. Xiao Hua had excavated the jade essence in Spring Gold Mountain. He had just harvested a piece and realized that something was wrong. He had also smashed a deep hole. The spirit stone veins in Flowing Ice Valley have long been excavated. There are only a few pieces left. That's why Sky Patrol City reported this place to the meeting hall like 7 Extremes Mountain and Spring Gold Mountain. Li Zongbao said calmly, Before we came, Master had already explained the pros and cons. This place is just to kill. Yes, to test the strength of the swordsmen in Flowing Ice Valley. It would be best if we could kill all of them. As for the spirit stones, this is an abandoned vein. Even if Junior Brother harvested all the spirit stones here, I'm afraid it would not be comparable to the spirit stones in the storage bag. Although a fly is small, it's still meat. Xiao Hua looked at the sparkling spirit stone with reluctance and said with a groan. A fly is meat, but if there is a big piece of fat meat outside, this fly can't be considered as fat meat. Li Zongbao said coldly. That's right. Xiao Hua slaps his forehead. Those sword cultivators' storage pouches definitely have more spirit stones than the ones here. Quick, Xiao Mao, let's chase after him. AI, Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua excitedly flying around and couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Although spirit stones weren't bad, to treat spirit stones so seriously, it really didn't match Xiao Hua's cultivation. Then Li Zongbao was a little envious. It seemed that having such a hobby was better than having no hobby at all. Okay? However, this thought only flashed in his mind for a moment before it was immediately killed. The parting feelings treasure mirror really needed to be parting feelings. These rather mundane hobbies had long been cleaned up by Li Zongbao. Xiao Hua excitedly rushed out of the karst cave, but immediately stopped at the entrance with a bitter expression. Not to mention finding those cultivators who were chasing after the swordsman, Xiao Hua didn't even have a clue how to return to the karst cave from before. In front of him, the tangled and complicated karst cave that was like a spider web was simply 100 times, 1,000 times more ferocious than those giants and wolf cultivators. Senior Martial Brother Li, please go first. Xiao Hua very politely stood in midair and raised his hand, inviting Li Zongbao to go first. The corners of Li Zongbao's mouth faintly curled into a smile. Although he was extremely unwilling to secretly laugh in his heart, he still couldn't help but laugh. Which cultivator who could step into the Qi refinement realm wasn't an outstanding figure among the mundane world? Moreover, since they were able to cultivate into the Foundation establishment realm, they were truly dragons and phoenixes among men. Their aptitude and insight made it difficult for others to catch up to them. Not to mention the ability to remember things with a single glance, this ability to recognize directions, even a slightly intelligent child could do it. However, Xiao Hua, who was able to easily kill a middle-stage core formation cultivator, was actually so weak in this aspect that it was hard to believe. This guy's divine sense is no small matter. If it wasn't for the fact that divine sense can't be used here, I'm afraid he would have already run away. A trace of emotion flashed in Li Zongbao's eyes. After carefully identifying for a moment, he flew in a certain direction without hesitation. Xiao Mao, look at the direction Senior Martial Brother Li is flying in. Is there anything special? Xiao Hua really couldn't see the difference between this karst cave and other karst caves, so he couldn't help but ask. Xiao Mao smiled and said, "This little brother also doesn't know. However, this little brother remembers the path we came from. Although this karst cave doesn't lead to the direction we came from, I feel that it should lead to the direction the swordsman fled in." Really? Xiao Hua looked at the endless stalactites in disbelief. No matter what, he couldn't see any difference. Damn it, this young master has the hand of karma. Xiao Hua was extremely indignant. This young master can even sense the karma of the world. There's no reason why this young master can't understand this, right? However, Xiao Hua, who could sense his own crisis, Cui Hongshan and Dui Qimeng's crisis, and even Xiao Mao's crisis, couldn't make sense of these minor details. Sure enough, after flying for less than an hour, under Li Zongbao's lead, sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes up, and sometimes down, there was a rumbling sound in their ears. Moreover, the rich water element Heaven-Earth Ling Qi in the karst cave also became more and more viscous, making people's skin feel moist. Hearing the sound, Xiao Hua really admired Li Zongbao from the bottom of his heart. For him, this absolutely couldn't be so easy. It was like letting Li Zongbao kill that wolf cultivator Liang Qi. Just as he was thinking, several third-grade swordsmen fled in panic from the front. "Where do you think you're going?" Seeing this, Li Zongbao's figure floated up, and the immortal piercing whip in his hand was about to wave again. Unfortunately, when those swordsmen saw Xiao Hua and the others, they immediately turned pale with fright. Their figures turned, and they fled toward a fork in the karst cave, simply faster than a shooting star. Li Zongbao's expression didn't change, as if sword cultivators should be like this when they see him. Just as he was about to chase after them, a dozen or so utmost happiness faction disciples rushed over from where the sword cultivators came from. When those disciples saw Li Zongbao, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Most of them cupped their hands and chased after those sword cultivators. There were also 3 late-stage Foundation establishment disciples who stayed behind. They stepped forward and greeted, "Senior Brother Li." "I don't dare." Li Zongbao hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "I've only just reached the late stage of Foundation establishment. How can I be addressed by 3 senior brothers like this?" Alas, if we're talking about age, we're naturally Senior Brother Li's senior brothers. However, even if we've already reached the late stage of Foundation establishment, compared to Senior Brother Li's magical powers, we're really ashamed. If you don't deserve the title of Senior Brother, then we can only call you Martial Uncle. The oldest-looking old man said very sincerely. That's right. Another old man also stepped forward and cupped his hands. Previously, we were still thinking that if it weren't for the help of Senior Brother Li and these 2 fellow cultivators, I'm afraid that over 10,000 of US disciples would have been buried in this flowing ice valley one by one. Greetings to the 2 junior brothers Xiao. The 3rd disciple stepped forward with a smile and said to Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao, "We disciples will always remember the help of the 2 fellow cultivators in our hearts. Hee. This is all Senior Brother Li's credit." Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hands. With his special permission from the conference hall, I was able to get together with junior brother Xiao Mao. Even coming to Flowing Ice Valley was under Senior Brother Li's command. We dare not claim credit. This disciple was a disciple of the Utopia faction. When he saw that Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect and Xiao Mao of the Xuanyan Order were so humble and did not compete with Li Zongbao for credit, he was even more delighted. No matter how he looked at them, they were pleasing to the eye. You 2 fellow cultivators don't need to be humble. The joint attack of the 2 of you and Senior Brother Li was not only seen by the disciples of the Utopia faction, but also by the disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley. If there's a contribution from the disciples of the Utopia faction, then there's definitely a contribution from the Imperial Thunder sect and the Xuanyan Order. When we return to the Sky Patrol City, we'll definitely report the truth. This great contribution will definitely belong to the 3 of you. Xiao Mao was overjoyed and bowed. "Senior brother, you're praising us too much." As they spoke, Li Zongbao had more or less understood the situation of the battle. Just as he thought, the sword cultivators were defeated like a landslide. Under the pursuit of the Taoist sect cultivators, they could only rely on their familiarity with the terrain of Flowing Ice Valley to escape the fate of total annihilation. But even so, when Xiao Hua chased the giant away, Chu Hui killed Liang Qi, and found this place, nearly 30% of the sword cultivators were killed. 30% of the sword cultivators, that was close to 4,000 people. It was inevitable that the elder of the Utopia faction was excited. Hee, not bad. Li Zongbao smiled and nodded. "Junior brothers, you've worked hard. I just came over from Uncle Chu Hui's place. Uncle Chu Hui fought against the giant and the wolf cultivator alone. Just when we lured the giant away, Uncle Chu Hui unleashed his invincible power and killed the wolf cultivator Liang Qi. In addition, when the giant saw that things were not going well, he was so scared that he fled in panic." "Great!" When the 3 disciples heard this, their faces lit up with joy. At this time, several disciples in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage flew over. They were the disciples of the Taibai faction and the Cool Breeze Valley. When they met, they exchanged pleasantries and expressed their gratitude. However, it was obvious that after the disciples of the 2 factions greeted Li Zongbao, they were more affectionate with Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. They even, in their words, they gave the credit to Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua was secretly happy. He knew that the 2 factions didn't want the Utopia faction to take all the credit. However, he just smiled and pushed Xiao Mao forward. Although Xiao Mao's reputation was not as good as Li Zongbao's, he was also smooth in dealing with people, almost similar to Cui Hongshan. In just a moment, he had gradually become the focus of everyone's attention. "Oh!" At this time, Li Zongbao suddenly raised his hand and said, "Fellow cultivators, please be quiet." Chapter 25-24. When everyone heard this, they immediately shut their mouths. Li Zongbao suddenly flew several feet to the side. He clapped his hands and took out a strange-looking jade pendant. Under the influence of his magic power, the jade pendant turned into a stream of light and rushed out. Marshal Uncle Chu Hui seems to have sent a message, but because this place is too far away. Xiao Mao explained. Sure enough, in less than half a cup of tea's time, 2 streams of light flew back from afar and landed in Li Zongbao's hands. When Li Zongbao's spiritual sense entered the flying message talisman, he suddenly understood. He raised his head and looked at the eager crowd. He smiled and said, "The battle of Flowing Ice Valley has ended. Marshal Uncle Chu Hui, Marshal Uncle Li Feiyu of Changbai sect, and Marshal Uncle Su Bo of Cool Breeze Valley joined forces and killed Qin Mu Ming of Void Heaven Sword School. However, Marshal Uncle Li Feiyu was killed by Qin Mu Ming's last attack." When everyone heard the first half of the sentence, they were about to cheer. However, the last sentence destroyed their excited expressions. Everyone from Changbai sect showed anger on their faces. "Let's go, we'll kill the remaining sword cultivators and avenge Marshal Uncle Li." But all the disciples of Changbai sect agreed in unison and sent out requests to the disciples of Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley. "Let's go. Kill the sword cultivators." The disciples of Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley were duty-bound. However, at this moment, a faint rumbling sound came from afar. At first, it was extremely soft, like the sound of thunder in the sky, but this sound was continuous, one sound after another, coming closer and closer from afar. What was special was that the vibration spread very quickly. It had long been affected by the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The rich water spiritual energy trembled rapidly. As the sound approached, it almost exploded. "This is bad." Others might not know the depth of the sound, but Xiaohua came out from the spiritual stone vein of Spring Gold Mountain. His first reaction was that someone had activated the defensive array of the spiritual stone vein of Flowing Ice Valley. Spring Gold Mountain. Xiaohua's expression changed greatly. He gritted his teeth and shouted these 3 words. Xiaohua didn't need to explain too much. Everyone's face turned ashen. Everyone present, who didn't know about the tens of thousands of sword cultivators and sword cultivators that died at Spring Gold Mountain? Quick! Everyone no longer talked about taking revenge for Li Feiyu. They all ran towards the place they thought was the safest. Dorush! Li Zongbao climbed up and shouted, "Panic is the most important thing right now. If you trust me, the 3 of you will follow behind us." After saying that, he didn't care about what the others thought and took the lead to rush out. The bystanders were in a state of panic. While they were deciding between themselves and Li Zongbao, Xiaohua did not hesitate to follow Li Zongbao. Since Xiaohua had left, even if Xiao Mao didn't trust Li Zongbao, he trusted Xiaohua. Naturally, he would fly away. The battle between the 3 of them was so eye-catching that it left a deep impression on the onlookers. Seeing that the 3 of them didn't panic and rushed into a karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction also followed them. Then, no one left. The disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley also followed them closely. Everyone tried their best to activate their true core strength. Their magic power was completely spent on the flying technique. They wanted to leave this underground mine as soon as possible. However, although they were flying extremely fast, the sound of the explosion was even faster. It was just like Xiaohua's thunder riding technique in the sky earlier. The crackling sound and the rumbling sound of the earth shaking and mountains shaking quickly caught up to them. Seeing a huge impact catching up to them from behind, even though they had already expected it and had already activated their protective spells to resist, there was a loud, woo, sound. The impact threw everyone high up into the cave. The true essence in everyone's meridians suddenly condensed for a moment, and they couldn't mobilize the slightest bit of magic power. Fortunately, it was only for a moment. The true core strength could flow smoothly again. Everyone struggled to stand in midair. Even Xiaohua was astonished. The impact was really too big. Even with his cultivation, he was also struggling to resist it. Just as they were struggling to stand, a violent rumbling sound came from all around them. It was as if a pair of big hands were shaking the 1,000-kilometer flowing ice valley. Xiao Hua and the others, who had just stabilized their bodies, were once again affected by the violent tremors. One by one, they fell to the ground in a sorry state. Fortunately, although these cultivators' bodies hadn't been specially tempered, they were still much stronger than ordinary people. They didn't have to worry about being injured. Pa, 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 pa. A series of explosions sounded in the air, following the violent tremors. However, the tremors were really strong, making it easy for everyone to ignore them. This is... Xiao Hua also fell to the ground. A light blue brilliance just happened to flash above his head. The sound was like a bolt of lightning piercing through the air. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and saw it. He was very shocked and whispered in a low voice. Li Zongbao was right next to Xiao Hua. His eyes also lit up. He immediately raised his head and looked left and right. He saw that the pa-pa sound was continuous. At the same time, the violent tremors continued forward. Even in the rock wall 100 feet away, the light blue brilliance and the pa-pa sound were also produced in the rock wall. What puzzled everyone was that after the frightening tremors and the impact that pushed all the cultivators down from the sky, it was as if nothing had happened. Everything returned to normal. If it weren't for the rumbling sounds in the distance and the fact that everyone fell to the ground in a sorry state, everyone would think that it was just a dream. What's going on? Xiao Hua scratched his head. He didn't believe that such a huge thing would have no effect. It was actually not a plot against the cultivators. Seniorly, Xiao Mao was also surprised. He crawled up from the ground and whispered, "Was the movement just now flowing ice valleys forbidden technique?" Li Zongbao shook his head slightly and said, "This flowing ice valley has been in the hands of the enemy for many years. Even if there was a forbidden technique, it would have been destroyed by the swordsmen long ago. So, this forbidden technique must be targeted at the cultivators of our Dao sect?" Xiao Mao's eyebrows knitted together. "It should be, right?" Li Zongbao activated his true core strength. When the true core strength circulated in his meridians, he didn't see any abnormalities. This was indeed abnormal, so he couldn't help but answer with some hesitation. "Oh no!" Xiao Hua suddenly shouted. "What's wrong?" "Junior Li, what did you think of?" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao asked hurriedly. Xiao Hua's expression changed. "The guarding disciples of this flowing ice valley are from the Void Heaven Sword faction and the Black Phoenix Sword faction. Isn't Qin Jian from the Void Heaven Sword faction? Qin Mu Ming, who was just killed by martial uncle Chu Hui, should be Qin Jian's blood relative, right?" Xiao Hua explained. "Yes, so what?" Li Zongbao still didn't understand. The other disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction also gathered around. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. That day, Tu Hong from the Sky Patrol City killed tens of thousands of people at Golden Spring Mountain. His reputation spread and he became the #1 hero of our Dao sect. He suppressed Qin Jian's fame. Seniorly, think about it, how could Qin Jian, who cherishes his reputation, let go of such an excellent opportunity? Since he could break into our Sky Patrol City and kill Tu Hong, I'm afraid he could turn this flowing ice valley into the second Golden Spring Mountain. Killing tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators should be his goal in this battle, right?" Hiss. Li Zongbao hadn't experienced Golden Spring Mountain, so he definitely didn't think as deeply as Xiao Hua. After hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately gasped. "That's right, this flowing ice valley has been in Qin Jian's hands for many years. He had already arranged everything. He was just waiting for the cultivators of our Dao sect to come and snatch it. As long as they snatched it, he could take advantage of the situation and kill the cultivators of our Dao sect and those swordsmen in the underground of the flowing ice valley. In this way, not only could he kill Tu Hong, but he would also have more achievements than Tu Hong. Wouldn't he be more famous than before?" "But, big brother, seniorly," Xiao Mao said in a low voice, "we didn't do anything wrong. This guy must be guarding the exit." Li Zongbao's expression changed drastically. "I'm afraid he destroyed all the karst caves just now and wanted to bury us here alive. Quick!" The disciples of the Utopia faction heard this and became anxious. "Let's quickly find the exit. Even if we have to risk our lives, we must rush out." Let's go! The disciples of the Changbai sect hurriedly activated their flying spell and rushed in the direction that Li Zongbao had flown to. Li Zongbao only hesitated for a moment before he hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No matter what, let's find the exit first." Xiao Hua nodded, but he felt a little relieved. Others might not have the 5 elements escape spell or the ground escape spell, but he was not afraid. Even if there was a restrictive spell, he could use the rabbit spiritual talisman to break it. Even if this place was deep underground in the flowing ice valley, he could still escape underground. At most, he would knock Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao out. Everyone flew in a panic for a moment, and there were even more cultivators who were like headless flies scurrying around. When they saw Li Zongbao and the others, they were immediately overjoyed and flew up together with them. As the number of people gradually increased, everyone calmed down. It seemed that the situation was not as bad as they had imagined. The karst cave did not seem to have any changes, let alone collapse. However, just when everyone had calmed down, someone suddenly said in surprise, Not good. I's true core strength is about to be used up. Huh, you're just a foundation establishment stage cultivator. A cultivator from the Cool Breeze Valley laughed. He was about to mock I, but when he said that, he turned pale with fright and said, "Not good as expected, my true core strength is also rapidly depleting." Stop quickly. Li Zongbao checked a little and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly shouted. As Li Zongbao stopped in midair, the crowd of about hundreds of people also stopped in midair. "It's not working, Senior Li," Xiao Mao said bitterly. "Even if we stop in midair, our true core strength is still depleting." Chapter 25-25. Seeing this, Xiao Hua landed on the ground without hesitation and said happily, "Everyone, come down quickly. If you don't use your magic power, your true core strength won't disappear mysteriously." As expected, when Li Zongbao and the others landed on the ground, the true core strength in their meridians stopped disappearing. "Let's meditate quickly," Li Zongbao hurriedly ordered. "Not good." A disciple of the Utopia faction shouted, "We can't use our skills. If we do, our true core strength will disappear after the spiritual chi of heaven and earth enters our bodies." Spiritual chi of heaven and earth? Xiao Hua suddenly realized and shouted, "Senior Brother Li, do you still remember the blue brilliance just now? I'm afraid the secret is here. In this karst cave, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth under the spirit stone vein can't be refined." Sure enough, although Xiao Hua didn't dare to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the dense and almost moist water vapor from before had dried up a lot. "Qin Jian, that guy is really cunning." Li Zongbao sighed. "He used this method to prevent us from using our magic power and absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. How can we be a match for a sword cultivator? He can kill a cultivator and protect a swordsman. His method is 100 times better than Tu Hong's." At this moment, Xiao Hua, who was originally confident, was no longer confident in his heart. Since Qin Jian was after the cultivator's true core strength and not burying the karst cave, he might not be able to escape. Xiao Hua's meridians were tough and wide, and his true core strength was absolutely incomparable to that of an ordinary cultivator. When he was flying just now, the true core strength he used was also extremely small, so he didn't notice it at that time. However, although the amount was small, it couldn't be produced by using his skills. If he used it little by little, it would be digested sooner or later. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He waved his hand and was about to take out the green spirit pill. However, a depressed voice was heard again. "Using the pill also doesn't work. It seems that when we were flying just now, we had already absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Now, using the pill can't produce true core strength at all. And when we used our skills, the true core strength in our meridians disappeared again. Damn it." Xiao Hua bit his lips. This news indeed made him feel very helpless. The water element heaven and earth spirit chi in this flowing ice valley is poisonous. A disciple shouted loudly, his voice sounding somewhat hysterical. After all, the The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was the foundation of a Tao sect cultivators' cultivation. They were constantly absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and all their spells relied on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as well as their true yuan. If the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was poisonous, wouldn't that be a drastic measure? Even if they had miraculous spells and incomparable divine abilities, they were all like the moon in the water, flowers in the mirror. Qin Jian's arrangements are so vicious. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion in his heart. This move was definitely more powerful than Tu Hong's that day. It directly knocked the Tao sect's cultivators down from the clouds and turned them into lambs waiting to be slaughtered by swordsmen. Fellow Taoists, let's hurry up and find the exit while we still have dermic powers in our bodies. Maybe we can escape. A Cool Breeze Valley disciple hurriedly shouted. He himself also wanted to rush into the air regardless of anything. Stuff. Li Zongbao berated, if you want to live, then wait here first. Right now, the most important thing is to stay calm. Senior Brother Li. That Cool Breeze Valley disciple sneered, we don't have Senior Brother Li's dermic powers. We can't hold on for a long time. When I's dermic powers are exhausted, then I'll be no different from a mortal. A sword cultivator can kill us with just a flick of his finger. How is your cultivation compared to a golden core master? Li Zongbao suddenly asked. That disciple was stunned and somewhat baffled. He asked in confusion, how can I compare to a golden core master? Yes, if a golden core master was here, wouldn't their dermic powers be affected? Li Zongbao said coldly. The golden core master's true yuan comes out from their golden core. That disciple hesitated for a moment before answering. Even if they absorb this poisonous water element heaven and earth spirit chi into their bodies, as long as their golden core doesn't release true yuan, they shouldn't be affected, right? What does Senior Brother Li mean? And this junior brother is right. Li Zongbao nodded. A golden core master's golden core master must have a defense against this kind of poison. Even if they can't resist it, their dermic powers should be enough to support them to find the exit. However, since Qin Jian of the Void Heaven Sword School used such a method, wouldn't he wait at the exit? This logic wasn't too profound, but everyone was too frightened to think about it. They only wanted to rush out, but when they heard this, they couldn't help but be shocked. Not only that, even if Qin Jian didn't wait at the exit of the flowing ice valley, those swordsmen who had been beaten to a pulp by them would still be dead. Senior Brother Li, since we can't go to the exit, then what should we do? That Cool Breeze Valley disciple immediately asked for help. His eyes were as eager as the other disciples. In fact, most of the time, the so-called wise men or leaders were just like ordinary people, and no one could see anything unusual about them. It was only in such extreme situations, when others were panicking and losing their minds, that these people would show the difference. Xiao Hua was calm, but that was because he had the strength. Even if everyone in front of him had to die, he would definitely be the last one. He was even confident that he could rush to the exit under Li Zongbao's lead. However, if he had to lead this group of cultivators to rush out, he was a little hesitant. At this moment, a voice came from beside Xiao Hua. In my opinion, the most important thing for us is to avoid the danger and escape from Qin Jian's trap. We shouldn't look for the exit of the flowing ice valley. Xiao Hua looked to the side and saw Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao was biting his lips slightly. Although he looked confident, his eyes were still looking at Li Zongbao and Xiao Hua. Obviously, he was still worried. That's right. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, Junior Brother Xiao is right. As long as we don't use our dermic powers, our true essence won't disappear. Even if swordsmen come, we won't be afraid for a while. There's no reason for us to walk into a trap. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, Xiao Mao received Li Zongbao's encouragement and said with courage, those swordsmen are scattered after being chased by us. They are also terrified. They might not dare to come to us and can only wait at the exit. We aren't in any danger right now. Not only that, Xiao Hua said with a smile, I even suspect that the swordsmen in the flowing ice valley don't know about Qin Jian's trap. Those swordsmen who were chased by us are still running away. The swordsmen guarding the exit are from the Void Heaven Sword School. Li Zongbao was also surprised. However, he immediately realized and nodded, "That's true. If those swordsmen knew about such a powerful backup plan, how could they fight so fiercely with us? They were also kept in the dark." Yes, everyone looked at Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao with admiration. Only Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. If he hadn't been bait at Jinquan Mountain, how could he have seen it so clearly? Although Qin Jian wasn't as generous as Tu Hong, he wasn't lacking in scheming. "We will first find a safe place." The disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction shouted, "Senior Brother Li, we will listen to your arrangements. We will go wherever you say." "Good." Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "We will only walk on the ground and don't use our true core strength." As he spoke, Li Zongbao looked in the direction and walked toward a karst cave. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua grabbed Li Zongbao and said with a smile, "Senior Brother Li, if you want to find a way out, I will definitely listen to you. However, if you want to find a dead end, Senior Brother Li, you can't compare to this little brother." Li Zongbao was slightly taken aback. At this moment, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to step forward. He didn't even try to identify him as he walked towards another cave. "This." Li Zongbao only thought for a moment and followed Xiao Hua without hesitation. When the others saw this, although they didn't trust Xiao Hua, they still followed. What made everyone stunned was that in just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they saw Xiao Hua calmly walk straight. He was leading them to a dead end. Everyone looked at the karst cave that was thousands of feet in size. Except for a small entrance, there was no other way out. Everyone was really speechless. "Big brother, you are really tall." Xiao Mao looked back at the karst cave entrance that was only about the height of a person. Compared to the other karst caves that were tens of feet in size, even if a swordsman passed by, he might not be able to see it. Hee. Xiao Hua was embarrassed and said shyly, "Big brother can only do so much. The rest will depend on you guys." Xiao Mao nodded. He looked at Li Zongbao and said, "If nothing unexpected happens, we should be safe here for the next few days. Even if a swordsman finds this place, we have the ability to resist. However, this is just treating the symptoms and not the root cause. In my opinion, the second thing is to detoxify the poison. We need to find the poison in this water-type heaven and earth spirit qi." "I agree with Junior Brother Xiao." Li Zongbao nodded and looked at the others. "Junior Brother Xiao is right." A Changbai sect disciple agreed. However, whether there is something wrong with the water-type heaven and earth spirit qi, or whether there is poison in the water-type heaven and earth spirit qi, we are all guessing. Even whether it is Qin Jian lying in ambush outside is also our guess. Who cares if it is true or not? As long as we can find the reason for the disappearance of the true Yuan. The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said impatiently. "Yes, which fellow Taoist knows how to detoxify and use poison?" Li Zongbao raised his voice. "I am not good at this and I have never heard of such a strange method." Seeing that everyone was silent, Xiao Hua said, "Senior Brother Li, regarding detoxification, I have some insights." "You?" Li Zongbao was really stunned. If it was anyone else who said that they knew how to use poison, Li Zongbao would not be surprised. However, it was Xiao Hua who said it. He could not help but be surprised. He almost grabbed Xiao Hua's hand and asked, "Junior Brother Xiao, other than giving birth, what else can you not do?" Chapter 25-26. Great! A disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction hurriedly said, "How does Senior Brother Xiao explain this poison? I won't hide it from everyone." Xiao Hua raised his voice. "Just now, I've already taken the antidote pill, but it's useless. Of course, I have other ways to detoxify the poison that I haven't tried yet, so I can't say that it will definitely detoxify the poison, but I feel that this poison, I'm afraid it won't be easy to detoxify it, or even, this might not be the same poison." When Xiao Hua's words came out, everyone was depressed, but there was still someone who hurriedly said, "Senior Brother Xiao, if you have other ways, please try it quickly, it would be best if it works." "Okay, I'll try it myself first." As Xiao Hua spoke, he looked up at the cave entrance that was taller than a person and asked, "Which fellow cultivator has a concealment array? How about covering this cave entrance?" Xiao Hua asked 3 times in a row, then a disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley whispered, "I do have an array, but it's very crude, it might not be of any use." Fellow cultivator, please give me the array talisman and array disc, I'll set up the array for you." Xiao Hua knew what that cultivator meant and said, "That's great." When that disciple heard this, he hurriedly took out a few array talismans and array disc and handed them to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua took them, looked at the jade slip, slightly pondered, and urged his magic power to set the array talisman down. He pointed his finger at the array disc, but with a flash of brilliance, the cave entrance was indeed blocked by the array, but Xiao Hua's true core strength was also consumed a lot. Then, Xiao Hua sat cross-legged at the entrance of the cave, waved his hand, and took out the green python's poison, preparing to use the antidote secret technique to fight poison with poison. However, when he was about to cast the spell on the snake poison, he hesitated again. Fighting poison with poison, you have to have poison in your body first. If you don't have poison and take the snake poison yourself, isn't that just courting death? After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua sighed and put away the snake poison. What that disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley said was reasonable. It might not be poisonous. How could he fight poison with poison? However, Xiao Hua still didn't get up, slowly urging his cultivation method, carefully observing the changes in his true core strength. True core strength followed the urging of his cultivation method and slowly flowed in his meridians. Just as it started to flow, the true core strength in his body disappeared. There was no sign at all, or any other special situation. How strange. Xiao Hua frowned as he pondered. It was not like he had never encountered anything that could devour true qi. Wasn't Mo Bao extremely powerful in the Mo Zhao Black Forest? Once the ink sand entered the meridians, it immediately blocked them. Even if it entered the dantian, the gold core would be corroded by the ink sand. However, the ink sand was a tangible object after all. How could it be like today? There were no clues at all? At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard outside the cave. It sounded like there were quite a number of people. "Junior brother Xiao, open the cave entrance. These footsteps belong to my Dao sect's disciples. Let them in. The more of us, the better." Li Zongbao and the others were in a predicament. No one knew what the poison was. The entire cave was quiet, and it was easy to hear the footsteps outside. Xiao Hua took out the formation plate and activated his magic power. With a flash of brilliance, the entrance to the cave was revealed. "Hey, there's a cave entrance here." A burst of noise immediately came over. "Fellow cultivators, come in." Xiao Hua walked out of the cave and saw a group of hundreds of people. He called out in a low voice, "Senior brother from the Imperial Thunder Sect." The sharp-eyed crowd immediately recognized Xiao Hua, who had just fought with Li Zongbao against the enemy, and their faces showed joy. Immediately after, when everyone had entered the cave, Xiao Hua once again covered the entrance of the cave. However, with this opening and closing of the cave, a lot of true essence disappeared. Alas, what kind of poison is this? When Xiao Hua used the magic art, he was very careful to check it. However, he did not see anything unusual. The hundreds of people were the same as Xiao Hua and the others. They were also a mix of the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction, the Changbai sect, and the Cool Breeze Valley. Moreover, their thoughts were the same as Xiao Hua and the others. However, they did not have any purpose and had not found a suitable place to hide. Alas, don't say that others are stupid. This world has never lacked smart people. Xiao Hua sighed and sat down again. He held his chin and pondered. The jade slips he obtained from the 10,000 Poisons sect were limited. That Shang Cheng was not a particularly famous person in the 10,000 Poisons sect. He could not find any useful clues. Xiao Hua suddenly realized something. He slightly opened his left hand and opened his illusion breaker Dharma Eye. This time, Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He saw that the entire karst cave was like a sea of blue, a sea of blue. That usually extremely light blue water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth seemed to have been thickened by ink. The color was much heavier. Moreover, this color dyed the inside of the cave. What he saw with his magic eye seemed to be what he saw at the bottom of the sea. Xiaohua quietly looked inside the stone wall again. It was the same deep blue, as if the whole world was this blue. Xiao Mao, come here for a moment. Xiaohua called Xiao Mao over and said in a low voice, "You exercise a little bit, okay?" Xiao Mao was very puzzled by Xiaohua's words. However, he still exercised his true core strength. In his magic eye, he saw that Xiao Mao was not in a human form. There were only a few azure veins that looked similar to meridians. As Xiao Mao exercised his true core strength, the azure veins moved slightly. Other than these azure veins, the other places were only light blue. However, this light blue was slowly becoming heavier. It should be that this special water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth was gradually seeping into Xiao Mao's body. "Yes, it's done," Xiaohua said in a low voice. Xiao Mao looked at Xiaohua and wanted to ask, but when he saw Xiaohua frowning and looking pensive, he didn't speak and returned to the crowd. "Fellow Taoists, we've already discussed it. The most important thing now is to find what exactly caused our true core strength to disappear. I wonder which of the new fellow Taoists knows?" Li Zongbao asked after greeting the crowd of cultivators. Unfortunately, a disciple of the utmost happiness faction answered in a low voice, "Senior Brother Li, we've also discussed this matter on the way here. None of us have heard of such a strange thing. Our 3 kingdoms of cultivation admittedly also have this kind of poisonous thing, but it's definitely not as mysterious as this thing. It can cause us to be poisoned without us noticing at all. We feel that this might not be the doing of a poisonous thing. It might be some kind of sword cultivator's secret technique." Yes, Li Zongbao nodded and declined to comment. "However, as long as we don't use our magic power, we'll be fine for now. Let's wait for a while. Maybe there's a chance of survival?" The disciples' plans seemed to be similar to that of Xiaohua and the others. "Senior Brother Li," Xiaohua sent a message to Li Zongbao. "In my opinion, our previous plan might not work." "Junior brother, what did you find?" Li Zongbao was slightly surprised. He knew Xiaohua was afraid that the others would panic, so he also sent a message to Li Zongbao. "This karst cave is the same as the outside world. The water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth is polluted," Xiaohua explained. "Although we don't move, our bodies are surrounded by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. The poisonous thing keeps entering our bodies. After a long time, we don't know what will happen. Moreover, according to Qin Jian's calculation, he wouldn't have guessed that we were hiding here. He must have some other poisonous trick to force us out and even kill us here." Hiss, Li Zongbao also took a deep breath and sighed. What Junior Brother said is really reasonable. Compared to Qin Jian, we're really too far apart. Not only in terms of cultivation, but also in terms of scheming. "Senior Brother Li, how can you boost others' prestige and destroy your own spirit?" Xiaohua said with a smile. "This is just my guess. It can't be taken seriously." "Yes, what are your plans?" Li Zongbao didn't say much and asked. "You wait here to discuss. I'll go out for a walk. Firstly, I'll see if I can gather more disciples. Secondly, I'll see if I can find a golden core master." Xiaohua replied. "Of course, if I can meet a golden core master, that would be the best. Alas, I have a secret technique with martial uncle. However, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is polluted. Not only can I not use the secret technique, but even if I could, I wouldn't dare to use it." Li Zongbao sighed. "However, I don't agree with Junior Brother's idea. After all, although your magic power is profound, your true essence will disappear and can't be replenished." Hearing this, Xiaohua also extinguished the idea of asking Li Zongbao for the secret technique. He smiled and said, "Senior Brother, don't worry. I have some confidence. If it doesn't work, I'll come back again." "All right." Li Zongbao sighed and watched Xiaohua open the restriction and take the array disc. "Senior Brother Xiao, what are you doing?" A Cool Breeze Valley disciple asked hurriedly. Oh, I'll go out and see if I can find other senior brothers or find another way out. Xiaohua didn't hide anything and said, That's great. I also have the same idea. I wonder if I can go with senior brother? The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said happily. Xiaohua glanced at him and said coldly, If you want to go out, none of us will stop you. However, I don't plan to go with others. After saying this, he turned around and left. Cough cough, Li Zongbao saw this and looked at the thousands of cultivators in the cave. He said, We're hiding here for the sake of expediency. We need to work together. If any of you have your own ideas like Xiaohua, you can go out now. I also hope that you can find a suitable way. Of course, for our safety, you only have one chance. If any of you want to go out, you can leave now. In the future, I'll be in charge of this array disc. Only others can come in and no one can go out unless we all leave together. Alright, I'll go out and try my luck. The Cool Breeze Valley disciple cupped his hands and was about to leave. Wait! A Changbai sect disciple stopped him and said coldly, You can go out, but you have to swear a blood oath that you can't reveal our location. Otherwise, I won't be at ease letting you go out. Xiao Hua from the Imperial Thunder sect just left. Why didn't you make him swear a blood oath? The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said angrily. Chapter 25-27. How can you compare to Senior Brother Xiao? Senior Brother Xiao defeated tens of thousands of sword cultivators with Senior Brother Li. Of course, he's going out for us. I'm not worried. The Changbai sect disciple replied without hesitation. That's right. Any disciple who wants to leave must first make a blood oath. The group of disciples came to their senses and said, Oh, but... The Cool Breeze Valley disciple was quick to make a blood oath and hurriedly left. Then, another dozen disciples left. There were disciples from the Cool Breeze Valley and the Utmost Happiness faction. However, none of the Changbai sect disciples left. Not to mention the other disciples' motives for leaving, Xiao Hua didn't activate his magic power when he came out of the cave. Instead, he used the ethereal steps. Although his speed wasn't as fast as the flying technique, it was still much faster than an ordinary person. He floated out of the cave like a wisp of smoke. After waiting for a few breaths, Xiao Hua slightly checked his true essence. There was also some consumption, but it was much less than when he used the flying technique. It seems that the blue thing in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth isn't as simple as I thought. If it accumulates in my body for a long time, even a slight movement will devour my true essence, right? Xiaohua thought. His body slowed down again. As he walked slowly, he released his divine sense. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with his divine sense. It could even go a little farther. At this time, the cave was dead silent. Only the sound of Xiao Hua's footsteps could be heard. There was no one else in sight. Presumably, the other cultivators had the same idea as Xiao Hua and the others. Here it is. Xiao Hua looked left and right. His body flew up and rushed toward the stone wall. When the stone wall was near, he used the earth escape technique and entered the stone wall. Oh, this stone wall is also strange. As soon as Xiao Hua entered the stone wall, he immediately felt a great resistance. It was not as easy as before when he used the earth escape technique. After a few dozen feet, he felt like he was wading through a quagmire. Even the true essence in his body was greatly consumed. He didn't dare to go any further and hurriedly retreated from the stone wall. Landing in the cave, Xiao Hua's expression was extremely ugly. Looking at the stone wall above his head, he lightly bit his lips. The last hope in his heart had also dissipated. Looks like if I can't find a thin enough stone wall, this young master's Fa Li won't be enough. If this vicious scheme wasn't done by Qin Jian, I wouldn't believe it even if you beat me to death. Qin Jian's face appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. He really wanted to stab Qin Jian's face a few times. Sigh, this guy mainly schemed against those few golden core cultivators, but he didn't expect to trap me as well. Xiao Hua sighed. Although his magic power was profound and was comparable to late-stage golden core, he was also helpless when encountering this thing that consumed true essence. Let's find where the stone walls are thin first. Xiao Hua thought as he opened his left hand and looked at the four walls of the karst cave. However, he only knew the name of the Dharma Eye. He didn't know the origin of the Dharma Eye at all, and there was no need to talk about any cultivation. Everything depended on the instincts of the Dharma Eye. Normally, when looking for the flaws of the Dharma Eye was right in front of him, and he could look at it. However, at this time, he had to look further and deeper. All of a sudden, Xiaohua was stumped. He didn't know how to look deeper, how to find where the stone walls were the shallowest. Even if I can't find it, then I still have to find it. Xiaohua knew that this was the only way for him, Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and the others to survive. He could only grit his teeth and slowly explore. The stone walls were filled with azure. It was no different from the other places in the karst cave. However, as Xiaohua wandered aimlessly, he gradually discovered a difference. The azure within the karst cave was just like that. It was like a clear sky, and it felt as if it stretched as far as the eye could see. However, the stone walls seemed to be mottled, and the brightness of the azure was somewhat different. It was as if some of the clouds in the sky were blocking the azure color. The inside of the stone walls are all rock layers, and there is also water-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If the stone walls are thicker, there will be more spiritual energy contained, and this azure color will be bright. Xiaohua inwardly pondered. If the stone walls are thinner, there will be less spiritual energy contained, and the azure color will naturally be dim. I only need to find where the color is the dimmest, and also the place that can be broken through the most. Then, I can use the overturning sea seal to break through this layer. Wouldn't I be able to escape? This place is definitely beyond the expectations of a sword cultivator, right? As it turned out, Xiaohua wanted to use the overturning sea seal to break through the layer and create a passage. However, Xiaohua didn't know how thick this rock layer was, and how much spiritual energy he would need to use to break through it. Therefore, he could only try his best to find where the azure color was the dimmest. Every time he found a place that looked similar, Xiaohua would use his Buddhist awareness to make a mark, and then continue to walk down. It was the same as when he left the karst cave. He also used his Buddhist awareness to make a mark. He didn't have the confidence that he could successfully find Li Zongbao and the others again. After searching for several hours, Xiaohua felt that he had walked more than 10 li. He had also made over 100 marks. Unfortunately, these marks were all similar, and there wasn't a particularly obvious dimness. Sigh, Xiaohua sighed slightly. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard movement in front of him. "Cunning cultivator, where are you going?" And the voice was getting closer and closer. Oh! Xiaohua heard that a cultivator was being chased by a sword cultivator. How could he ignore it? He hurriedly walked a few steps, and just as he was about to go over to take a look, he saw a few sword lights in the distance flying towards him. Ah? Since when did Changbai sect cultivators understand sword cultivator flying swords? Seeing a Changbai sect disciple in Taoist robes desperately escaping on a flying sword with 3 sword cultivators chasing behind him, Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. But just a moment later, Xiaohua said self-deprecatingly, "Since this young master can practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators, the Changbai sect has disciples who practice flying swords, there is no reason not to practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators. Senior brother Xiao, save me." That Changbai sect disciple wasn't fated to die. When he saw Xiaohua from afar, he was overjoyed and hurriedly shouted. Even if Xiaohua didn't want to save him, he couldn't escape now. Fortunately, Xiaohua's awe-inspiring aura from before was still present. When the 3 swordsmen saw that it was actually this fiend, their expressions changed and they immediately turned to flee, afraid that Xiaohua would catch up to them. Xiaohua's little tail also stood up when he saw how mighty he was. Little did he know that the sword cultivators who had escaped were all curling their lips as they whispered in unison, "Just let this guy be free for a while. After this round of killing, he will know the methods of us sword cultivators." The Changbai sect disciple landed and bowed respectfully with lingering fear. Junior brother Niu Ming from Changbai sect greets senior brother Xiao. "Thank you, senior brother, for saving my life." "Don't mention it." Xiaohua waved his hand. "I didn't even lift my hand. What life-saving grace is there?" It's all because of senior brother's awe-inspiring reputation. You were much more powerful than anyone else when you raised your hand. Niu Ming flattered. Then he looked behind Xiao Hua and asked curiously, Senior brother Li Zongbao and junior brother Xiao Mao, they hid like the other disciples. Why didn't you hide? Xiao Hua didn't directly tell him where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding and asked him a question instead. Sai, junior brother feels that just hiding isn't the best strategy. We should find a place to break through before the sword cultivators make their next move. Otherwise, we can only be slaughtered by the sword cultivators. Niu Ming didn't hide anything and said. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. Did you find anything? Sai, if it was so easy to find, then the sword cultivators' preparations over the past few years would have been in vain. Niu Ming sighed. Junior brother only searched for 2 hours and saw that the number of sword cultivators in the cave gradually increased. They must have come out to kill us. Junior brother tried to hide, but I was still discovered by several sword cultivators. If it wasn't for senior brother Xiao, junior brother probably wouldn't have been able to escape. Xiao Hua didn't comment. He looked at Niu Ming and narrowed his eyes. Niu Ming didn't understand. He looked at himself in surprise and then looked around. When he saw the flying sword in his hand, his expression changed slightly. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Junior brother Niu, since you already found something wrong, do you still need me to say it? Senior brother Xiao, Niu Ming hurriedly smiled apologetically, I am indeed a disciple of the Changbai sect. I'm definitely not a sword cultivator. This flying sword. Sai, since I've reached this level, I don't dare to hide it. However, when I was practicing the secret technique, I already swore a blood oath that I couldn't reveal a single word. I hope senior brother Xiao can understand. The disciples of the Changbai sect are good at flying swords. It's normal for them to practice the flying sword technique of sword cultivators. Xiao Hua said with a smile. But the restriction of the Sky Patrol City is specially designed to check the sword origin. How did you escape? Of course, there's a secret technique. Niu Ming smiled bitterly. Obviously, this involved a blood oath. But I'm really curious. I also want to prove that you're not a sword cultivator. Xiao Hua continued to ask. Although there are jade slips in my storage bag, if senior brother Xiao forces me, I'd rather die together with you. Niu Ming said sternly. It was Xiao Hua's Taoist robe swaying. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand without hesitation and grabbed Niu Ming's throat like a flash of lightning. Niu Ming was shocked. Although he was prepared, he didn't expect Xiao Hua to be so fast. The strangest thing was that there didn't seem to be any spiritual power fluctuations. However, he was only shocked when Xiao Hua pressed his thumb on his neck. His vision turned black and he fainted. Xiao Hua looked at Niu Ming who had fallen to the ground, then reached out and took his storage pouch. He opened it and looked carefully. There weren't many jade slips inside, so he didn't look at them carefully. He copied them one by one and put them back into his storage pouch. Then he put the storage bag in Niu Ming's arms. He took the jade slips and checked them one by one. Chapter 25-28. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua was proficient in the art of flying swords. He only needed to read it once to understand. Some of the Changbai sect's disciples have been nurturing swords since they were young, but these disciples were specially selected. Their primordial spirits are strong enough to withstand the division. It seems that Reverend Brightsword left some of his secret techniques in the Changbai sect. These disciples have both vital essence and sword essence in their bodies. They usually use vital essence to drive ordinary flying swords and use secret techniques to conceal sword essence. But now, they don't use vital essence and only use sword essence. Of course, they won't be affected by the strange spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, the Changbai sect doesn't allow this secret technique to be publicized, so these disciples don't dare to use it easily. Moreover, with sword cultivation alone, these disciples who are in the foundation stage can only fall into the realm of nurturing swords. They are no match for sword cultivators, so. Xiao Hua pinched his chin and pondered. Senior brother Xiao, what happened to me? Why did I suddenly faint? Niu Ming slowly woke up and asked in surprise. You were being chased by sword cultivators just now. Maybe your qi and blood surged. Xiao Hua collected his thoughts and said with a smile. So that's how it is. Niu Ming nodded. Thank you, senior brother Xiao, for looking after me. Well, do you want to go by yourself now? Or do you want to go by yourself? Xiao Hua asked. What? Xiao Hua's question stunned Niu Ming. Then he came to his senses and said with a bitter smile, since I've already come out, there's no reason to turn back. I'd better find a way out myself. But Xiao Hua nodded and pointed in a direction. Senior brother Li Zongbao and the others are there. You can go there and find them. If there's a chance, you can go by yourself. If not, we'll be together and take care of each other. Oh, right, there are hundreds of your sect's disciples there. Hearing this, Niu Ming's eyes lit up. He bowed again and said, Thank you, senior brother Xiao, for your advice. I understand. I'll go now. Senior brother, you have to be careful too. We'll go. Xiao Hua waved his hand and watched Niu Ming leave on his flying sword. Damn it, the Changbai sect is indeed powerful. Why didn't I think of this? They actually concealed sword essence. Xiao Hua turned around and walked in Niu Ming's direction. As he walked, he took out a jade slip and carefully examined it. His dream executioner and mountain splitter had been successfully nurtured into swords, and he had been using dream executioner for a long time. However, he had never deliberately cultivated the flying sword arts of sword cultivators. He had always used his original spiritual sense to control the flying sword, which was no different from using a magic treasure. However, such a flying sword could only be a magic treasure and not a true flying sword, even if it had a sword spirit. Although he had recently begun to comprehend the sword arts of ordinary sword cultivators, he was still hesitant. Sword cultivation was different from the Buddhist sect. Sword essence could be easily seen by cultivators. Moreover, in the midst of a great sword Dao battle, he was already afraid that he would be discovered by others. How could he dare to cultivate sword essence? When he thought of sword origin, Xiao Hua understood why his 7-star Great Formation was not as powerful as Ling Yunwu's 7-star Great Formation. Not only did he control it through his sword pouch, not only did his 7-star Great Formation consist of 7 flying swords transformed from illusory swords, but most importantly, it should be sword origin, right? And the reason why his flying sword could not produce sword intent was probably because of sword origin, right? But Reverend Brightsword's jade slip did not mention that one must cultivate sword origin. Xiao Hua was somewhat baffled. But how could Reverend Brightsword's flying sword have sword intent? Unfortunately, Reverend Brightsword had already fallen. Xiao Hua was dead and could not testify. Forget it, let's wait and see. If it can really conceal sword origin, this young master will also give it a try. Xiao Hua secretly made up his mind. Moreover, this Niu Ming's jade slip also has the sword arts of nurturing sword and drawing sword. If he can cultivate it, then this young master can naturally cultivate it too. But where is this? Xiao Hua originally went back the way he came, but when his mind relaxed slightly, he immediately showed his instincts. He actually walked to a dead end, a place similar to the karst cave Xiao Hua first found. Xiao Hua only looked and was about to turn around, but at this moment he casually raised his hand again. The brilliance here is very dim. After Xiao Hua saw it with his Dharma eye, he could not help but be overjoyed. It's here. Xiao Hua did not hesitate to use his Buddhist sense to make an imprint, hurriedly walked out, and then walked back. The way back was naturally not as easy as before. Xiao Hua easily found several dead ends, and these dead ends without exception. The walls of the karst cave looked extremely thin. Damn it, did I make a mistake? Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. If that's the case, then the first karst cave this young master found was the thinnest place, right? Didn't this young master's efforts go in vain? Oh, that's not right. At that time, I already saw it in the karst cave. It was not like that. Xiao Hua immediately shook his head again. But fortunately, Xiao Hua had other Buddhist sense marks along the way. Although he spent a lot of effort, he finally found the way back. Not far from the karst cave where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding, Xiaohua found another karst cave. This karst cave was smaller than the previous one, but it looked darker than the others. Moreover, Xiaohua also gradually fumbled around. The smaller the karst cave on the dead end, the thinner the walls. Like the one he found before, the walls were naturally thick. After Xiaohua removed his Buddhist sense imprint and hammered the walls a few times, Li Zongbao noticed the movement and opened the restriction, letting Xiaohua in. Seeing Xiaohua come back safely, Li Zongbao was overjoyed. Without waiting for him to speak, Xiaohua's eyes swept the karst cave, and he could not help but be stunned. Before he left, there were only a few hundred people in this karst cave, not 1,000. But now, the inside of the karst cave was dark. At a glance, there were thousands of people, perhaps tens of thousands. Why are there so many people? Xiaohua felt inconceivable. After all, it was only a dozen or so hours. Most importantly, he only met that cultivator, Niu Ming, along the way. However, Xiaohua immediately understood. It was not that there was no one in this karst cave, but everyone was looking for a way out. Only he could not find a way out. He was looking for a dead end, and on this dead end he could only meet Niu Ming, who was also forced into a dead end. Damn it, is this young master so unlucky? Xiaohua rubbed his nose, almost touching the phoenix talisman on his chest. It's like this. How could Li Zongbao know that Xiaohua suddenly raised this matter to countless heights? He explained, after junior brother Xiao left, we discussed for a long time, but we did not have any ideas. We did not even have the slightest clue about this strange poison. We thought that we could not just sit and wait for death, and put all our hopes on junior brother. Therefore, we chose a few disciples with profound magic power from each sect and asked them to go out and find the disciples of other sects. So it's like this. Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief and smiled. That's the best. Junior brother also felt that the weight on his shoulders was very heavy, and I was afraid that I could not bear it. I just don't know how the discussion went. Sigh, what the hell? Li Zongbao also cursed. There are nearly 10,000 cultivators in my Dao sect, but none of them have seen this poison before. They say that it is a strange poison that can devour one's vital energy. Also, a few disciples have some antidote pills on them, but they are all useless. Even a disciple lost his life because of it. Fight poison with poison. This idea immediately appeared in Xiaohua's mind. He was very glad that he did not use it forcefully before. While they were talking, there were some fluctuations of magic power at the entrance of the cave. Li Zongbao did not even think and wanted to activate the formation plate. Junior brother should do it. Xiaohua stretched out his hand. In such a dangerous place, one more bit of true essence is one more bit of guarantee. With a flash of his hand, Xiaohua took the formation plate that Li Zongbao did not want to return to him. He pointed his hand and a green light slowly flew towards the entrance of the cave. After the array flashed, it revealed close to 100 Changbai sect disciples at the entrance of the cave. Senior brother Li, senior brother Xiao. These disciples clearly recognized Xiaohua and Li Zongbao. They cupped their hands and quickly walked in. All right, senior brothers, please come in. Behind Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao had already arrived. However, when he saw Li Zongbao talking to Xiaohua, he did not greet them. Instead, he stepped forward and nodded slightly at Xiaohua, and was about to lead the Changbai sect disciples in. Senior brother Li. A Changbai sect disciple at the front said softly, I have an older senior brother who seems to have some understanding of this strange poison. I did not dare to delay and quickly brought them over. Oh? Is that so? That's great. Li Zongbao was overjoyed. He turned around and said to Xiao Mao, invite senior brother Yi Bei from Changbai sect and senior brother Jian Boming from Qingfeng Valley over. We will discuss this together. Xiao Mao hastily turned around. Before long, two white-haired late-stage foundation building old men quickly walked over. Both of them greeted Xiaohua. Then, the 100 or so Changbai sect disciples left with Xiao Mao. A short and wrinkled middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator stayed behind. However, Yi Bei from Changbai sect saw that this elder was unfamiliar. He cupped his hands and said, "Forgive me for not recognizing you, but I don't think I've seen you in the sect before?" "Ha, senior brother Yi, I'm only a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator. I'm just a good-for-nothing disciple of the Changbai sect. How could the sect catch your eye?" The old man smacked his dry lips and smiled apologetically. That's true." Yi Bei nodded. "Changbai sect has many foundation establishment disciples. There are also many disciples from the 18 Sword Peaks. There are too many that I haven't seen before. How should I address you, junior brother?" "I'm Bai Fei." The elder was slightly surprised as he replied. "Alright, junior brother Bai, what do you know? If you can help with the detoxification this time, our lives will be saved by you. This is a great contribution. I will definitely ask for a reward for you." Chapter 25-29. This. Bai Fei bit his lips and his eyes flickered. "What's wrong?" Yi Bei was slightly stunned and asked curiously, "Could it be that you have some concerns?" Hearing this, Li Zongbao and the others unconsciously took a few steps back. If Bai Fei said yes, they would retreat immediately. However, Bai Fei smiled and said in a low voice, "Of course not. Although this thing is very old, it is far from being a secret. Moreover, this matter is very important. I naturally won't have any concerns." Yi Bei's expression softened and he nodded. This matter concerns the lives of tens of thousands of disciples from the 3 sections. Even if it is a secret of the Changbai sect, we can't not reveal it. Just say it. If there is anything wrong, senior brother Li and senior brother Jian will bear witness. I will bear all responsibility. Hee, actually it is not as secret as senior brother said. Bai Fei smiled and finally spoke. "I don't want any special rewards. I just want to ask senior brother Yi for a cultivation method." "You don't want this amazing merit?" When Yi Bei heard this, he instantly felt that something was amiss. However, he still said, "If your information is effective and can save the lives of these 10,000 people, not to mention the rewards from the sect, even the gratitude of these 10,000 people would be more useful than any cultivation technique. With this, won't the sect reward you with a cultivation method?" Hee, senior brother Ye's words are naturally reasonable. Bai Fei smiled apologetically. However, these merit are all needed by senior brother Li, senior brother Xiao, senior brother Yi and senior brother Jian. Why would you want merit from a nobody like me? It's not as practical as some of the sect's secret techniques. Yi Bei looked at Li Zongbao and bit his lips hard. "If I can't take out this cultivation method, you will not save them? Will you let these disciples be killed by sword cultivators? Don't forget, Bai Fei, you've also been poisoned by this strange poison. If you say it out loud, who among us has a way out? Do you still have a way out?" Jian Boming could not bear to watch any longer and said in a low voice. Unexpectedly, Bai Fei swept his gaze over Jian Boming and sneered, "Senior apprentice brother Jian is probably a direct disciple of Cool Breeze Valley, right? You don't know the suffering of us low-level disciples. There are some secret techniques that we have long coveted, but no matter what kind of contributions we make, they will not be rewarded. Even if I reveal this information today, even if tens of thousands of disciples are saved, most of the battle merits will belong to others. How much will I lose? Even if I have these merits, I may not be able to give you the secret technique I want. Why can't I just ask for it? Are you sure that I know the secret technique you want?" Yi Bei asked thoughtfully. "Aren't you afraid that I will search your soul?" Jian Boming asked coldly. Of course I'm scared." Bai Fei wasn't afraid at all. "However, do you think the other disciples of the Changbai sect will just stand by and watch you perform a soul search for no reason? Do you think you'll be able to soul search the things you know? Do you think that I don't have any other fellow apprentices that I'm close to? Even so, I still want to try." Jian Boming narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Bai Fei, what secret technique do you want?" Yi Bei glanced at Jian Boming and asked in a low voice. Bai Fei ignored Jian Boming and said to Yi Bei, "I want that sword." At this point, Bai Fei glanced at Xiao Hua and the others and said a few words through voice transmission. Obviously, Yi Bei's expression didn't change when he heard this. Only the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. It was obvious that this request wasn't out of his expectations, but this request really put him in a difficult position. Of course, if senior apprentice brother Yi doesn't agree, then I'll pretend that I never said this. Bai Fei said confidently. Haha, why wouldn't I agree? Yi Bei only thought for a moment before he clapped his hands and took out 2 jade slips. He copied one of them and handed it to Bai Fei. He said, if it's for the lives of the tens of thousands of disciples of the 3 sects and the thousands of disciples of the Changbai sect, my blood oath is nothing. Good. Xiaohua's blood boiled as he watched this. He clapped his hands and said, Senior apprentice brother Yi, just based on what you said, the heavens will definitely not let that bullshit blood oath take effect. Thank you for your auspicious words, senior apprentice brother Xiao. Yi Bei sighed in his heart. He really didn't expect that at this critical moment, there would be a disciple of his sect like Bai Fei who would ask for a price using a jade slip. He despised and hated Bai Fei in his heart, but he had no choice but to listen to him. After all, this was the lives of tens of thousands of disciples. Wait, Jian Boming said anxiously, Bai Fei, what if the information you take out isn't related to this exotic poison? Hee, I'm in this karst cave. If the information is wrong, you can take the jade slip away at any time. Bai Fei's face was distorted with joy. He stared at the glowing jade slip in Yi Bei's hand. Give it to me. Yi Bei's expression didn't change as he stretched out his other hand. Bai Fei wasn't afraid that Yi Bei would change his mind. He opened his hand and a broken jade slip was handed over. However, when he let go of it, his other hand took the jade slip from Yi Bei's hand first. After Bai Fei read it with his divine sense, he bowed deeply and said, Thank you, senior apprentice brother Yi. Yi Bei snorted and ignored him. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip and read it. However, when he first looked at it, his face was still filled with joy, but gradually, it changed. A bitter smile appeared on his face. Everyone was surprised, but they waited quietly. After a while, Yi Bei handed the jade slip to Li Zongbao with a bitter smile and said, Senior apprentice brother Li, take a look. What's wrong? Is the information Bai Fei gave wrong? Isn't it this exotic poison? Jian Boming said fiercely, if that's the case, even if he's a disciple of your Changbai sect, I won't forgive him. Sigh. Yi Bei shook his head and smiled bitterly. What Bai Fei gave is indeed correct. We were poisoned by the spirit-binding juice mentioned in his jade slip. However, even if we know this item and the method to detoxify this item, I'm afraid it's useless. Is that so? Even Xiaohua was stunned when he heard this. Sure enough, after Li Zongbao finished reading, his face darkened. It was obvious that what Yi Bei said was true. Li Zongbao raised his hand to hand the jade slip to Jian Boming, but Jian Boming hurriedly stepped back and handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony. He took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it for a moment. He really did not know whether to laugh or cry. He handed the jade slip back to Jian Boming and looked at Bai Fei, who had already sneaked into the Changbai sect disciples in the distance. He shook his head vigorously. It turned out that according to the records in the jade slip, this so-called spirit-binding juice was once used in the sword battle 10,000 years ago. That battle was participated by the nascent soul masters. It was a sword array set up in a water-based place near the sword tomb. At that time, one nascent soul cultivator, 10 golden core cultivators and thousands of foundation establishment cultivators were ambushed. They barely escaped after losing 8 golden core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. This incident caused a huge sensation at that time. Everyone in the Sky Patrol City was in a state of panic. Everyone was very afraid that they would encounter such a terrifying sword array one day. However, after the nascent soul cultivator recovered his spiritual power and discussed with many other nascent soul cultivators, he discovered that although this spirit-binding juice was powerful, it also had a huge drawback. This spirit-binding juice could only be used in water-based places with rich spiritual power. Moreover, it was only effective for 3 days. After these 3 days, the spirit-binding juice would lose its effect and the cultivator's spiritual power would gradually recover. The most ridiculous thing was that this spirit-binding juice did not require any antidote. As long as the cultivator who was affected by the spirit-binding juice left the range of water-based spiritual power and was blown by a strong wind in midair, the spirit-binding juice in his body would immediately disappear. Of course, after the spirit-binding juice disappeared, there were still side effects. However, the jade slip only mentioned it occasionally and did not go into detail. That day, the nascent soul cultivator persevered for 3 days before he defeated the sword array and broke out with the remaining disciples. Even those disciples with cultivation in the early stage of foundation establishment did not take any antidote and their spiritual power was also restored. It was also this spirit-binding juice that relied on the element of surprise to kill 8 gold core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. Later on, the sword cultivator used it several times, but it did not have any effect, so he did not use it again. Therefore, there were only a few records in the ancient books of many sections. By now, it had probably been forgotten by others. This Bai Fei had probably obtained the jade amulet from somewhere by chance. Only then did he know the reason for the spirit-binding juice. No wonder that Bai Fei did not want any battle merits or rewards. It's fine if others don't know about this thing, but if they do, the things on the jade slip are really not worth half a spirit stone. How can the conference hall give him battle merits? Xiao Hua sighed and said, he might as well take this opportunity to ask for some secret method of the sect. Sigh. Jian Boming also sighed when he saw this. Now that we know the origin of the spirit-binding juice, but it's useless. It's useful. Xiao Mao smiled and said, we only need to persevere for 2 more days and this spirit-binding juice will be removed. It's a pity that Qin Jian won't give us 2 more days. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. With Qin Jian's cunning, how could he let them recover their spiritual power? Xiao Hua even felt that gathering tens of thousands of people here might be Qin Jian's arrangement to catch them all in one fell swoop. That's right. Li Zongbao nodded. I think we'll be able to, woo-woo. A faint sound like a cow mooing came from afar, followed by the sound of water dripping into everyone's ears. This is... Xiao Hua's expression changed slightly. He suddenly thought of the river he saw in Flowing Ice Valley and immediately understood. He said anxiously, not good. Qin Jian poured the river water of Flowing Ice Valley into the karst cave. Of course, the entrance of Flowing Ice Valley's spirit stone vein was in the river. It was easy to pour the river water in. Besides, Qin Jian had already made arrangements. There were probably more than 10 entrances to the river. Chapter 25-30. Under normal circumstances, these foundation building cultivators and even aura refining cultivators wouldn't pay attention to this surging river water, but what about now? The river water would definitely stimulate the effect of the spirit-binding juice, and cultivators would also have to use their magic power to avoid the river water. No matter how one looked at it, pouring the river water was the most poisonous trick. That's right, it was the river water. Soon, the sound of the surging river water and waves hitting the karst cave quickly spread over. Of course, many cultivators began to panic. Follow me. At this moment, Xiao Hua made up his mind and waved his hand. I have a way. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao? Li Zongbao was stunned at first, then he was overjoyed because Xiao Hua had never disappointed him. Li Zongbao hastily flew into the air and shouted, disciples of all sects, get into formation and follow us out. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect has already found a way out. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Xiao. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Li. Everyone cheered loudly, and a few aura refining disciples were almost crying tears of joy. Seeing Li Zongbao's momentum, Xiao Hua said anxiously, Senior Marshal Brother Li, I only have a way. I don't dare to say it'll be completely useful. As long as it's a way, it might be useful. Li Zongbao answered indifferently, if it's not like this, they'll be in chaos first. How will we defend against the enemy? How will we contend against the river water? Xiao Hua nodded, feeling his shoulders immediately become heavy again. Not daring to be negligent, Xiao Hua hastily flew out of the karst cave, closed his eyes, released his Buddhist sense, and flew towards the place marked previously. Xiao Hua muttered as he flew, secretly praying that he wouldn't lose it this time. Perhaps Xiao Hua's prayer was effective, or perhaps Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was effective. In short, after a while, Xiao Hua successfully found the karst cave marked last. It's here. Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. There's a way out here? Li Zongbao scanned with his divine sense and saw another karst cave without a way out. Beside him, Xiao Mao was also surprised. There's no way out now, but this little brother will soon find a way out. Xiao Hua flew into the cave and clapped his hands. The seal of overturning sea landed in his hands. With a tap of his hand, the seal of overturning sea rapidly expanded. Seal of overturning the sea? Li Zongbao exclaimed in shock. Where did you get it from? Ah? You actually recognize him? Xiao Hua was speechless. According to Ji Yi, this thing had disappeared for thousands of years. How could Li Zongbao from the utmost happiness faction recognize it? Li Zongbao frowned as if he thought of something and said, I know a thing or two about the famous magic treasures of the various sections. The seal of the Changbai sect is also famous in Meng, how can I not know? Although he had mysteriously disappeared for 1,000 years, to think that he had fallen into the hands of a sword cultivator, I have no other choice. Xiao Hua pointed at the rock wall and said, I can only rely on the magic power in my body to activate the seal of overturning the sea to break through this place. Other than that, there is indeed no other way. Good brother. Li Zongbao nodded. Go ahead and do it. This thing is given to you by me. Ugh. Xiao Hua shook his head. I'm afraid this reason is not very useful. Li Zongbao came to his senses and looked outside the karst cave. He said, I will go out now and ask many disciples to set up a defense in front of the karst cave. First, they will block the river water. Second, they will block the sword cultivators. I will not let them in. Thank you, Senior Brother Li. As he spoke, Xiao Hua activated his magic power. The seal of overturning the sea emitted a yellow brilliance. Spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered like a swarm of bees. Lines of jade appeared on the seal of overturning the sea. Go! Xiao Hua shouted. He grasped the seal of overturning the sea with his bare hands and used his strength to smash it at the place he had chosen earlier. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out and the entire karst cave shook. A hole of several feet in size and several feet deep was smashed out by the seal of overturning the sea. Countless stones fell down from the sky with a crackling sound. When Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Hua had taken action, he didn't have time to ask why he had chosen this place. He hurriedly flew out of the karst cave. Li Zongbao raised the divine piercing whip in his hand and shouted, Disciples, listen to my command. Whoever dares to use his divine sense to spy on the karst cave, whoever dares to take half a step into the karst cave will be killed by me. Disciples of the Utopia faction, set up a defense in the center. Disciples of the Taibai faction, set up a defense in the left. Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, set up a defense in the right. The terrain here is very high. We will release our magic weapons to block the river water. Don't let the river water rush into the karst cave. As long as we hold on for a few breaths, the river water will naturally flow to another place. Yes, we understand. Although the disciples didn't know what Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao were doing in the karst cave, they saw that only Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao came out. Xiao Hua must be doing something inside. At this time, the loud rumbling sound had already reached everyone's ears. Those who were smart already knew what Xiao Hua was thinking. Although Xiao Hua's action was really the stupidest method, at this time, what other methods did they have? Although Xiao Hua's method was the stupidest, it was the most effective. As long as the path was opened, they could rush out of the underground. Then, the sword cultivators and the spirit-binding juice would be turned into smoke. Therefore, these disciples were very obedient to Li Zongbao's arrangement. They took out their magic weapons and lined up in a formation. With their backs to the karst cave, they quietly waited for the river water to come. Of course, they didn't dare to use their divine sense to spy on the karst cave. They were afraid that Li Zongbao's divine piercing whip would fall on their bodies. However, in the formation of the Changbai sect, the disciple Bai Fei, who had just exchanged the spirit-binding juice jade pendant for one of Yi Bei's secret arts of the Changbai sect, was shocked again. He took out his flying sword and waited for the river water to come. At the same time, he listened carefully. The sound of Xiaohua hitting the rock wall with the seal of the tumbling sea came again and again. First, it was like an earthquake. Then, the sound became softer and softer, but the vibration was still there. After listening for a while, Bai Fei's face suddenly showed astonishment. Then, joy appeared in his eyes. Then Bai Fei turned and flew towards the karst cave. Bai Fei, what are you doing? Yi Bei was behind the Changbai sect disciples. Seeing Bai Fei's strange behavior, he shouted angrily. All right, senior brother Yi, this little brother has something to tell senior brother Xiao Huaxiao. Bai Fei shouted. It's important, it's absolutely important. Stuff. Yi Bei sneered. What other shady business do you want to do? Don't take advantage of our kindness. I wouldn't dare. Bai Fei smiled bitterly. This matter is really important. It's definitely different from before. If there's any falsehood this time, I'll let senior brother Xiao punish me. Yi Bei was a bit embarrassed and looked at Li Zongbao. Come here. Li Zongbao originally wanted to refuse, but when he thought about how this guy actually had a jade talisman that recorded a poison like the spirit-binding juice from 10,000 years ago, he knew that he definitely had something else. Bai Fei arrived in front of Li Zongbao and stole a glance at the karst cave. He transmitted his voice. I'll be frank. Did senior brother Xiao Hua use my Changbai sect's cloud-suppressing seal or ocean-overturning seal to break through the walls? How do you know? Li Zongbao's expression didn't change. I judged it from the sound. Bai Fei didn't hide it. I have the secret technique to use these two items. I'm willing to give it to you. Oh! Li Zongbao was moved. He knew that even if Xiao Hua had the ocean-overturning seal, he might not have the complete method to refine and use it. I don't know whether it's these two treasures or not. Li Zongbao said coldly. He couldn't be bothered to deal with this rare oddity in a Dao cultivator battle. I'll have to ask senior brother Li. This concerns my life. I can't just sit back and do nothing, Bai Fei said with deep emotion. So, you're willing to give it out for free? Li Zongbao looked at Bai Fei strangely. He really didn't believe it. Hee, of course I can't give it out for free. Bai Fei smiled apologetically. However, my condition is very simple. I'm sure senior brother Li can fulfill it. Tell me. Li Zongbao didn't ask for the jade slip at all. He just asked for the conditions first. It's nothing. Just two conditions. Bai Fei's eyes were filled with hope. Say it. Li Zongbao replied indifferently. The first condition is very simple. If this passage is broken through, I hope to pass through after senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao. Or if the three senior brothers don't take the lead, then I'll be the fourth. Bai Fei bit his lips and smiled apologetically. The second condition. The second condition is also very simple. I need a cultivation method and a flying sword. The cultivation method is for sword cultivators. It can be cultivated all the way to the 3rd grade of illusory sword. The flying sword is for illusory swordsmen. What? Li Zongbao was stunned. You're a Changbai sect disciple and a Taoist sect cultivator. What do you need the flying sword and cultivation method for? Senior brother Li, you don't have to worry about this. Bai Fei smiled embarrassedly. Senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao are so brave, they must have this item in their storage pouches. As long as senior brother Li agrees, this little brother will immediately give senior brother Xiao the secret technique of refining and using the seal. I don't have what you want. Li Zongbao waved his sleeves and shook his head. What about the other senior brother Xiao? As he spoke, Bai Fei looked at Xiao Mao. However, he had been transmitting his voice to Li Zongbao. Xiao Mao didn't know at all. When he saw the white-haired old man looking at him, he was rather surprised. What he didn't know was that he had been promoted to senior brother in this old man's words. Forget it, Li Zongbao said indifferently. You wait. I'll ask junior brother Xiao first. Thank you, senior brother Li. Bai Fei's lips curled into a smile. He was very sure that his ears didn't mishear. Xiao Hua would definitely exchange with him. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua heard Li Zongbao's words, he couldn't help but be shocked. What? Bai Fei can actually hear with his own ears that I'm using the seal of overturning the sea? How can this be? It seems like it's true. Li Zongbao nodded. This guy is also a genius. If he used his mind on the righteous path, he should have achieved great success. However, his methods are somewhat despicable. In my opinion, his future achievements will be limited. Chapter 25:31. Xiao Hua said with a smile, "That's your opinion. Bai Fei might not think so." Moreover, he deliberately searched for every opportunity to cultivate. Every step was calculated by him. His achievements might not be inferior to yours and mine. So much so that he'll far surpass us in the future. Heaven rewards the diligent, but heaven doesn't reward despicable people. Even if his cultivation far surpasses mine and his methods are contemptible, I still don't think highly of him. He doesn't need you to think highly of him. Xiao Hua angrily responded to Li Zongbao. Alas, that's true. Li Zongbao actually understood in his heart. He sighed. Everyone has their own way of cultivating. Everyone has their own way of living. Why should I impose my own way of thinking on others? Moreover, Bai Fei's plan is really common on Dawn Rain Continent, and it's also really effective. Now, which cultivator doesn't look at immediate benefits and place the great Tao at the bottom of cultivation advancement? That's right. Seeing Li Zongbao sigh with emotion, Xiao Hua smiled. Go get his jade slip. If it's useful, I'll agree to his conditions. I'll go right away, Li Zongbao said and was about to turn back, but at this time, Xiao Hua stopped Li Zongbao again and said, Also, senior brother Li, the river is about to arrive, but the swordsmen haven't attacked yet. Blocking the river doesn't require so many people, right? Let the remaining disciples come over. Each of them will consume 10% of their magic power to help me open up the passage. There are thousands of disciples here. Even if each of them opens up 3 feet, those 3 will still be 10 feet. If everyone works hard, it'll be close to 2,000 feet, almost a dozen miles. It's much more effective than me doing it myself. Li Zongbao looked at the passage that Xiao Hua opened up and shook his head slightly. Human strength is sometimes limited. You can think of borrowing the power of other cultivators at this juncture. It's really praiseworthy. However, even if you say so, it might not work. Just now, I also thought about this. Among the thousands of disciples, at most 60% will have suitable treasures. Among these 60% will be at the mid or late foundation establishment stage. In fact, less than 40% will be able to come out. Also, the higher you go, the more difficult it will be. Even the inner layer of restrictions is not something we can break. That formation also consumes a lot of magic power, so don't be too optimistic. And that's indeed the case. Xiao Hua also nodded. Just now, when I was circulating my energy, I was already thinking about it. However, I might not be able to clear it by myself. Only with the help of these disciples will we be able to succeed. Li Zongbao nodded and instructed, All right, expand the passageway a little more. When the passageway gets deeper, one disciple will enter, and the other will follow. Don't waste time. Got it. Also, tell them to put the broken stones into their storage bags. Don't worry, everyone knows about such details. Li Zongbao said disapprovingly. Little brother will expand the passageway right now. Xiao Hua agreed. Swinging his arms, he started to work hard. Not long after, Li Zongbao came back with an old jade pendant. which was similar to the one that Bai Fei had given to Yi Bei. Xiao Hua looked at it with his divine thought, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He snorted coldly and said, Bai Fei was right. This is indeed the secret art of refining and using the cloud-suppressing seal, the sea-overturning seal, and the mountain-crushing seal. It's absolutely correct. This Bai Fei, what's his background? How could he have so many secret arts of the Changbai sect? Who cares who he is? Li Zongbao sneered. He's just a disciple in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. He's not from the Utopia faction. He can do whatever he wants. All right, Xiao Hua said, and took out a sword slip and a flying sword from the space and gave them to Li Zongbao. He said, give this to Bai Fei. Little brother will go to the side to refine the sea-overturning seal. I still need to comprehend the secret art of using it. You let the other disciples come in and open the passageway. Li Zongbao didn't say anything. He took the sword slip and the flying sword and walked out. Not long after, the disciples of the Utopia faction came in first. One by one, they rushed into the passageway that Xiao Hua had already opened, which was more than 10 feet long. At this time, the rumbling sound of waves could be heard from outside. The torrential river water had already rushed into the karst cave with a huge amount of ice. According to Li Zongbao's previous arrangement, the disciples of the three factions each stood in a place and took out their magic weapons. The magic weapons emitted a bright brilliance, like a barrier blocking the river water. Everyone looked at the different magic weapons in the river water. The magic power in their bodies was like the river water and disappeared very quickly. They were terrified. If it weren't for the calm disciples like Li Zongbao and the support of the disciples like Xiao Hua who could find a way to escape, they really didn't dare to imagine what would happen to them if they were alone in the river water. Disciples, if more than half of your magic power is consumed, immediately withdraw and let the disciples behind you support you. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao stood behind the crowd. Li Zongbao arranged for the disciples to enter the karst cave to open the passageway. Xiao Mao saw the light curtain in front of him faintly flickering and immediately shouted. Yes, we understand. The crowd of disciples shouted. Their voices rushed into the karst cave and echoed back and forth. The momentum was like a rainbow, suppressing the torrential river water. The river water seemed to be endless. In one breath, it poured in for less than half an hour. Although the cultivators guarding in front of them had changed dozens of times, the river water still continued to surge. The waves in front of the light curtain were several feet long. Looking inside the karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction had all entered. Li Zongbao roughly estimated that there were less than 2,000 people. Moreover, he had already asked the disciples who fell in the passageway. Their magic weapons were not suitable for them, and the rock wall was incomparably hard. Each person could only open about 2 feet of the wall, and they were powerless to do more. However, even so, Li Zongbao estimated that there should be a distance of 3 to 4 miles. Moreover, as the height increased, the disciples flew up and down, which consumed a lot of magic power. Originally, they entered the passageway one by one, but now, the passageway, which was more than 3 miles long, accommodated nearly 40 disciples of the Utopia faction. Alas, how deep is this karst cave? Li Zongbao sighed. When I came in, I didn't think it was so deep. Oh no, seniorly. While Li Zongbao was thinking, Xiao Mao flew in and said hurriedly, the river water has gradually stopped, but the sword cultivators are attacking again. There are also thousands of them. Hearing this, Li Zongbao was a little surprised, but it was not beyond his expectations. He waved his hand and said, disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my order. We will go out to meet the enemy. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley come in. The rest of the disciples of the Utopia faction flew out, and the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley outside the karst cave lined up and flew in again. At this time, the river water had stopped flowing. However, in front of the defensive light curtain, nearly 3 feet of river water gathered and did not recede. Looking into the distance, there was a black mass of sword cultivators crossing the river water on their flying swords and rushing over. Good. My fellow cultivators, Now is the key to our survival. The cultivators inside are breaking through the rock wall. We only need to hold on to the end, and we will be able to escape from here. Li Zongbao flew in the air and said coldly as his holy whip emitted a faint golden light. Seniorly, Yi Bei of the Changbai sect saluted and said, "Now that we have reached the most critical moment, we disciples of the Changbai sect do not dare to hide anything anymore. In this battle, we disciples of the Changbai sect will take the lead, and the disciples of the Utopia faction and the Cool Breeze Valley will help us on both sides. What do you think?" "Great." Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, "I want to see the secret arts of the Changbai sect." "All right." Yi Bei raised his hand and said loudly, "Junior brothers, we've been forced to a dead end now, and we've fulfilled our blood oath. Since it's like this, then let's allow those damnable sword cultivators to see who's the true cultivator of the sword." Then, nearly 3,000 disciples of the Changbai sect flew up. About 40% of the disciples were standing on flying swords like the sword cultivators, and all kinds of sword lights were shining. The other 60% of the disciples were using the flying technique, and they were holding the usual Taoist flying swords. However, they were all charging towards the sword cultivators without hesitation. Li Zongbao was stunned at first, but then he understood. He waved his hand and said, "Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command, kill." Nearly 2,000 disciples of the Utopia faction flew up and activated their magic weapons to fight against the enemies. Just as Li Zongbao flew up, an old man said hurriedly, "Senior Li, don't fight against the enemies. You still need to stay in the middle and guard the karst cave. This karst cave is the key to our escape." Li Zongbao stopped in the air and thought for a while. Then he bowed and said, "Thank you, junior brother." But the old man had already flown up and rushed into the battle. Then, Li Zongbao looked at the 2,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and said a few words to Jian Boming. Jian Boming waved his hand and said, "Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, listen to my command. We will split into two groups. One group will fly into the karst cave as soon as possible and open up the passage. Then we will immediately get into formation to fight against the enemies. The other group will follow me to fight against the enemies." Naturally, the 1,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley who stayed behind turned around and flew into the air under Jian Boming's command. They formed a formation and rushed towards the sword cultivators. Suddenly, the karst cave that had been silent for a day and a night was filled with the sounds of killing again. However, the fight this time was different from the previous one. The sword cultivators were clearly delaying. They would either form a sword formation to attack the cultivators, or they would fight the cultivators on their flying swords. Whenever there was danger, they would immediately retreat. They did not fight to the death with the cultivators. On the other hand, the cultivators were stingy with their magic power and did not dare to forcefully chase after them. The flying techniques of the swordsmen were originally faster than that of the cultivators. As a result, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, although there were many screams, most of them were cultivators who died. The number of swordsmen who fell into the river was even fewer. Of course, it was good that the cultivators today were not afraid of the sword cultivators. They still had some strength left in them, so it seemed that they were not in a bad situation. Chapter 25:32. Very quickly, another hour passed. Half of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples had entered the tunnel, but the progress of the tunnel was even more severe. After asking, Li Zongbao knew that the tunnel was less than 2 miles long. When the second batch of Cool Breeze Valley disciples prepared to enter the karst cave, another problem occurred. After an hour of fighting, not to mention the casualties, even the returning disciples had expended more than half of their spiritual power. They flew up the tunnel, used their spiritual power again, and flew back to the karst cave. The amount of spiritual power they could use was even less. When they entered the battle again, the situation was even more dangerous. In other words, these disciples could either stay here and kill sword cultivators or enter the cave to open the tunnel. If they did both, their lives would be in danger. Sigh, Li Zongbao was a bit anxious, but he had no choice. This tunnel could not be opened by Xiaohua alone. He could only let the Cool Breeze Valley disciples open the tunnel as much as possible. Looking at the sword cultivator disciples, they saw that the cultivators who were fighting with them had suddenly retreated and lined up to retreat into the karst cave in the distance. Seeing that there were other disciples coming out of the karst cave, they naturally felt strange. After a while, the swordsmen who were in charge immediately realized that something was amiss. On one hand, they changed their tactics and tried their best to encourage the swordsmen to fight, while on the other hand, they hurriedly sent out swordsmen to report. Seeing this, Li Zongbao was even more anxious. At this time, it was the drawing sword and the nurturing sword disciples who were fighting. Not a single illusory swordsman had appeared. Even so, all the Dao sect cultivators should only have half of their dermic powers left in their bodies, right? As time passed, the spirit-binding juice continued to devour his magic power. His previous thought of persevering for another 2 days and 2 nights was absolutely wishful thinking. All the paths were blocked, and he could only hope that the tunnel in the cave behind him would open up in time. The swordsmen changed their tactics, and their morale soared. The cultivators were completely suppressed, and many of the disciples fell from the sky, never to emerge from the river again. Looking at the Changbai sect disciples at the front, they activated their sword energy and stepped on their flying swords to meet the swordsmen. Their flying swords were filled with sword intent and sword chi. They were no different from the flying swords of the sword cultivators. The sword cultivators were shocked at first, but then they sneered and skillfully controlled their flying swords to fight against the Changbai sect disciples. At first, the two sides were evenly matched and the Changbai sect disciples even had a slight advantage. But in just the time it took to eat a meal, the Changbai sect disciples were at a disadvantage. After all, they were used to using magic to control their swords. At first, they could still concentrate, but as the danger increased, they started to make mistakes. As a result, naturally, many Changbai sect disciples used sword energy to fly on their swords while using their vital essence to activate their flying swords to fight against the swordsmen. This was supposed to be the best choice between the two sections. It should have been effective. However, after a short while, many disciples of the Changbai sect showed signs of pain. It seemed that there was a problem with the flying sword. After a long time, several disciples even fell into the river for no apparent reason. Therefore, the Changbai sect disciples were forced to take back their sword cultivator flying swords and focus on channeling their magic power to use their Dao sect flying swords to fight the enemy. Of course, even so, the Changbai sect disciples used the least amount of magic power. In this battle, they were the main force against the sword cultivators. Seeing the situation, Li Zongbao wanted to call the Changbai sect disciples back and prepare to enter the tunnel, but he gave up. Opening the tunnel was important, but they could not underestimate the enemy. If the Changbai sect disciples were to retreat, the sword cultivators would be able to reach the karst cave. Not to mention the tunnel could not be opened, all the cultivators would die. Senior brother Li, what's the situation? Xiaohua quietly appeared behind Li Zongbao. Not good. Li Zongbao's face was dark. If we can't open the tunnel in an hour, when the thousands of disciples run out of magic power, we will all be souls under the sword of the sword cultivators. Xiaohua also sighed. He did not know how long the tunnel would be, but he knew that Li Zongbao was right. Even if he rushed up now, it would be like throwing a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. His magic power would not be able to resist many sword cultivators. I will follow the Cool Breeze Valley disciples to open the tunnel. The other disciples do not need to come. Xiaohua looked at the Cool Breeze Valley disciples who were still waiting to enter the karst cave and said, "But..." Li Zongbao glanced at Xiaohua and nodded slightly. "I will leave this matter to junior brother Xiao. We will definitely stall for time and leave you some time. Let's pray that the rock wall is not too deep." Xiaohua smiled. "I only have so much magic power. If I run out of magic power and still can't open the rock wall, it will be useless no matter how much time we have." Then by Fei's secret technique, Li Zongbao did not forget to ask as he turned around, "It's the real deal." Xiaohua only answered with 4 words and then followed behind a Cool Breeze Valley disciple. Under Jian Boming's arrangement, the remaining Cool Breeze Valley disciples charged into the Dao sect cultivators who had already fallen into a declining battle. Xiaohua had already flown to an extremely deep passageway when he saw a disciple flying out, followed by another disciple flying in. He then used his divine perception to scan the Cool Breeze Valley's disciples who stopped every 10 feet or so in the passageway. He sighed with emotion. There's strength in numbers, there's no mistake about that. Previously, I thought that I could open the tunnel by myself, but now that I see it, I really do not know the immensity of heaven and earth. How many miles have we gone? I'm afraid it's 6 to 7 miles. I haven't reached the end yet. If I were to open the tunnel by myself, I'm afraid that 1 mile would be the limit, right? However, if Xiaohua's 1 mile was heard by others, they would definitely be dumbfounded. 1 mile was 150 feet. Other cultivators could only shoot out 1 or 2 feet, and that was already not bad. This guy directly shot out 100 feet. How could others live with this? As the Cool Breeze Valley disciples flew out one by one, Xiaohua also flew into the tunnel. At this time, the tunnel was a few feet wide, barely enough for the two of them to brush past each other. Just as Xiaohua was calculating where to go, a disciple above him transmitted a message, reporting to Senior Brother Xiao. The senior brother in front has encountered a restriction. He is unable to break the formation. Please give us your orders. Ha! Great! Hearing this, Xiaohua could not help but be overjoyed. Since they had reached the formation, how far could the surface be? You all can go out. I will take care of the rest. Xiaohua laughed loudly. You all send a message to Senior Brother Li. If there are no accidents, an hour should be enough. That disciple passed the message to his superiors. He immediately cupped his hands toward Xiaohua and flew down, saying, Thank you for everything, Senior Brother Xiao. I will never forget this great favor. I don't dare. Xiaohua was all smiles as he watched that disciple land. However, who would have thought that the remaining disciples seemed to have made an agreement? Each of them said one sentence after another with such sincerity that Xiaohua really could not bear it. After waiting for the 40 disciples to leave, Xiaohua also flew to the top of the passage. He saw that there was a layer of restriction that was surging with blue light. The blue brilliance was like rippling water. If there were some fish swimming in it, it would definitely be like seawater. Hiss, Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and took a deep breath. He said curiously, This is clearly the formation of a Dao sect cultivator. It is not a sword cultivator's sword formation. Then, Xiaohua used his Dharma eyes to look for a moment and found that the spirit-binding juice had fused with this formation. Moreover, it was now dispersing into the rock wall along with the formation from time to time. And I understand. Xiaohua nodded slightly. Since I can understand Buddhism and the Changbai sect disciples can practice the flying swords of sword cultivators, why can't sword cultivators practice my Dao sect's spells and formations? This flowing ice valley formation probably did not have any special changes and it was used by that bastard Qin Jian. Fine, I don't care what kind of formation it is. Even if it is a sword formation in my hands, it is just a piece of paper. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the rabbit spirit talisman. He opened his Dharma eye and examined it. Then he placed the spirit talisman on the weak point of the array. Immediately after, he grabbed the spirit talisman with his hand. The spirit talisman flashed with brilliance, and several small dots began to vibrate within the blue brilliance. All of the brilliance slowly overlapped and slowly linked together. Finally, it formed a rapid whirlpool. When the whirlpool spun faster and faster, a hole several feet in size appeared within the array. I don't dare to touch you now. In a moment I will show you how powerful I am. Xiaohua waved his hand again and threw 2 fire talismans at the hole in the rock wall. Then he took a deep breath and activated his Dharma powers. With a slap of his hand, the yellow overturn ocean seal flew out. Quick! Xiaohua chanted and his hands formed a seal. The Dharma powers in his body surged and rushed into his fingertips. As the Dharma powers entered the overturned ocean seal, the overturned ocean seal didn't expand like before. Instead, it suddenly sucked in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and emitted a fierce roar. Then, the dragon head coiled around the overturned ocean seal suddenly raised and actually let out a dragon roar. Moreover, the dragon body coiled around the overturned ocean seal also began to move. Xiao Hua knew that his time was limited and didn't dare to be negligent. He pointed his finger again and saw the coiling dragon fly away from the overturned ocean seal. It opened its mouth in midair and actually sucked the overturned ocean seal into its mouth. Woo, a thunderous sound reverberated. The coiling dragon held the overturned ocean seal in its mouth and charged straight into the rock wall. Rumble! A loud sound rang out and the tunnel was opened by nearly 10 feet. Damn it, it is indeed powerful. The Dharma powers used are much less than before, but the effect is several times more. A complete Dharma treasure is indeed powerful. Although Xiao Hua was looking forward to it, the result was really beyond his expectations. He originally thought that it would be good if he could push it out 30 to 40 feet. Who knew that it would actually be close to 10 feet? A secret technique is indeed a secret technique. A secret technique combined with a Dharma treasure is even more powerful. Xiao Hua pondered, that Bai Fei took this opportunity to blackmail me, but every cultivator carries a humble heart to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Every cultivator racked their brains to find a 1 in 10,000 chance to raise their cultivation. Perhaps Bai Fei didn't have a chance like me. I'm afraid that he could only use this chance to thicken his face and ask me for a sword cultivator's sword technique. Forget it, who cares about him? I will benefit even more from this. Chapter 25-33. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua's view of Bai Fei gradually improved. Ignoring everything else, he urged his Fa Li to activate the seal of the overturning sea in one go. That earthen yellow dragon shape rushed out from Xiao Hua's hand again and again, and each time it penetrated deeper into the earth. Xiao Hua was secretly delighted. He understood that this layer of earth was about to reach its end. However, Xiao Hua was still happy too early. The seal of the overturning sea was a complete magic treasure. The amount of Fa Li required to activate it was definitely not ordinary. Xiao Hua was already much more careful, but seeing that the true yuan in his body was gradually drying up, the front was still pitch black and there were no signs of it reaching its end. Granny, I won't fail, right? Xiao Hua was somewhat restless. How about this young master uses the wishful staff again? Secretly taking a deep breath, Xiao Hua very naturally activated his cultivation technique. Just as he activated it, he immediately came to a realization and hurriedly stopped his cultivation technique. This was because this was drinking poison to quench thirst. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly flashed with a bolt of lightning. This young master is confused. That Qin Jian used the flowing ice valleys array to activate the spirit binding juice. Even if there is spirit binding juice on top of this forbidden technique, but most of it should be facing downwards. This place is already close to the top of the cliff, how could there be a lot of spirit binding juice? Thus, Xiao Hua impatiently opened his eyes. Sure enough, the azure color near him was very faint. It was not even different from what he usually saw. Ha! Xiao Hua laughed loudly. He hurriedly waved his hand and a few pills entered his mouth. A wave of pure heaven and earth spiritual qi rushed into Xiao Hua's meridians. Xiao Hua took advantage of this to activate his cultivation technique. The long-lost true yuan immediately began to circulate. Although some true yuan suddenly disappeared, compared to the newly formed true yuan, it was still a bit less. This young master understands now. This spirit-binding juice was probably left in this young master's body before. Didn't that Bai Fei's jade amulet say that it was good? It can be removed with just a blow of the wind. There's no wind here, so I'll let it have wind. Xiao Hua waved his hand and several more elixirs entered his mouth. Immediately after, the immortal body bestowment technique and dragon transformation art circulated once more. The surrounding world spirit chi turned into tiny hurricanes and poured into Xiao Hua's body. Within his meridians and body, the amount of true origin that was regenerated increased. Very quickly, it exceeded the amount of true origin that was disappearing. Clearly, as the world spirit chi poured into Xiao Hua's body, the spirit binding juice in Xiao Hua's body was gradually removed. Watch me! With true essence, what was there for Xiao Hua to be afraid of? He roared and no longer held back on his magic power. Almost all of his magic power was channeled into the sea overturning seal. Roar! The yellow dragon on the sea overturning seal was also as excited as Xiao Hua. It roared and held the seal in its mouth as it rushed into the soil again and again. Rumble! Xiao Hua had actually forcefully activated the seal of overturning sea to attack the passageway for nearly the time it took to eat a meal. He reckoned that he had probably opened up another several kilometers of passageway. This time, he heard a loud noise, and a strand of starlight was reflected in his eyes. Soon after, a gust of cold wind blew into the passageway. Great! Xiao Hua hastily withdrew his magic power and put away the sea overturning seal, afraid that it would attract the attention of the sword cultivators. He also didn't delay in the slightest. He took a few pills, turned around, and used the awakening lightning escape technique to fly into the cave. The battle inside the cave was really tragic. Every cultivator fought until the very last moment. The magic power in their bodies could only support them for a few breaths of time. Many people's gazes looked towards the cave from time to time. Everyone's figure also involuntarily gathered towards the cave. Li Zongbao and Xiao Hua had agreed on an hour. However, this hour had already passed, and he still hadn't received any message from Xiao Hua. I'm afraid that today will be the day of my fall. Li Zongbao urged his magic power. The immortal piercing whip drew a golden whip shadow and repelled a sword cultivator. Li Zongbao sighed and habitually looked towards the cave. Unfortunately, this time, it was still the same. There was no figure that surprised him. Hiss, eat my whip. Looking at the sword cultivator who was repelled by him flying towards him again, Li Zongbao was angry. When he was about to urge his magic power again, he saw a crimson-red messaging charm flying in front of his eyes. Xiao Hua! Li Zongbao almost cried with joy. There were too many surprises in this world. How could he, who practiced the parting love treasure mirror, endure? When he took the messaging charm and scanned it with his divine thought, he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivators, Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect has opened the passage. We will act according to the previous discussion." Seniorly, not far away, Bai Fei was still alive. He hurriedly said, "Don't forget about me. You're the first to go out." Li Zongbao was extremely disdainful and pointed with his finger. "Thank you, seniorly," Bai Fei shouted. He left his opponent and immediately rushed into the cave. Seeing Bai Fei run away, the disciples were a little confused. "Don't panic. Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command. Turn the formation outward and let the disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Yes." The disciples of the Utopia faction shouted loudly and responded. "Ha ha ha, seniorly, you've underestimated the disciples of the Changbai sect." Yi Bei was injured, but he shouted straightforwardly, "I will lead the disciples of the Changbai sect to accompany the fellow cultivators of the Utopia faction. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Good. A friend in need is a friend indeed." Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, "Junior Yi, you're my friend. There's also me." Jian Boming's injuries were more serious, but he was also full of pride. He flew into the air and said, "Let the injured disciples and those who don't have enough magic power go first. We'll bring up the rear." "Ha ha ha ha, there's also me." Xiao Mao was also injured, but he also flew to stand beside Li Zongbao. "Good," everyone laughed heartily. However, their divine senses scanned the surroundings vigilantly. When the disciples of the three factions heard the words of the three people, even though they had a strong desire to live, they did not dare to be too presumptuous. Not to mention, there were many disciples who stood in front of Li Zongbao and the others, ready to fight to the death. In fact, the situation was as such. The passage could only allow 2 people to go out at the same time. If they left early, they could escape. But if they left late, or even slightly late, how could they escape? Don't forget, there were thousands of swordsmen. How could they let the cultivators escape so easily? Li Zongbao, Yi Bei, and Jian Boming's words were their final plan. They knew in their hearts that among the 6,000 cultivators, there were about 2,000 who would not be able to escape. The 3 of them would be the last 3, hoping that they could save more cultivators by fighting to the death. The injured disciples rushed into the karst cave in an orderly manner, but it was troublesome to enter the passageway. Under everyone's command, the entrance to the passageway was a mess. Many disciples rushed in, causing chaos. "Xiao Mao, you go and command them." Li Zongbao pointed and shouted. "Yes, I understand." Xiao Mao received the order and hurriedly flew to the entrance of the karst cave. Li Zongbao's voice rang in his ears again. "Xiao Hua entrusted you to me, so I have to think for you. When the time is right, enter the passage." Xiao Mao bit his lips slightly and did not reply. He only flew to the entrance of the passage and scolded, "Don't rush. You go first. You follow behind." Alas, this is a real man. Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Mao did not respond and knew what Xiao Mao was thinking. He secretly shook his head and waved the holy piercing whip again to command the disciples of the Utopia faction to resist the crazy attacks of the swordsmen. As long as one was a human, there would always be competition in their hearts. Even cultivators were the same. If there was no one to lead them and they saw someone else enter the passage before them, they would definitely mutter, "Why is it you and not me? When will I be able to enter the passage?" But if there was someone to command first, the cultivator had a rule in his heart. He knew that it would be his turn soon, so he would listen to the command of others. Not to mention that Xiao Mao was now famous for his fighting prowess. Everyone was very convinced by him. When Xiao Mao came to mediate, order was quickly restored. More and more people left and fewer people stayed. However, the attacks of the swordsmen did not stop. In fact, they were even more ferocious. Li Zongbao and the others could not hold on any longer. Seeing that there were still more than 3,000 people left, Li Zongbao sighed and looked up. Tens of thousands of swordsmen activated their flying swords. Every time, they would take away a life. Every drop of blood sprinkled into the river. To be able to save 3,000 people is already good enough. Li Zongbao thought to himself and shouted again, "Fellow cultivator Jian, fellow cultivator Yi, you and the others should also prepare to leave. We will leave as many as we can. Let the disciples closest to the karst cave retreat." Yi Bei saw that there were fewer and fewer people in the karst cave and shouted loudly, "Ha! Damn it! You're squeezing me to death." Just when Li Zongbao was about to agree, he heard a bright laughter in the small karst cave. "Senior brother Xiao is here. Senior brother Xiao is back." Everyone in the karst cave cheered loudly, as if they had suddenly found a pillar of support. "Xiao Hua, why did you come back?" Li Zongbao's heart warmed, and he actually complained secretly. "Big brother." Xiao Mao was also very surprised. "Walk slowly, don't be anxious." Xiao Hua glanced at the somewhat messy karst cave and said coldly, "Since this Xiao is here, all of you can leave. Don't worry, no one will be left behind." "Yes, yes." A few disciples who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to enter the passage immediately calmed down. "You command here." Xiao Hua instructed Xiao Mao, "Whoever dares to act recklessly, directly kill them." Xiao Mao replied loudly, "Fellow cultivators, you and the others slowly retreat. Don't mess up the formation." Xiao Hua saw that the situation was urgent and didn't say much. He slowly flew out of the karst cave and stood in midair like a proud god. His voice slowly rippled in the karst cave without any hint of panic. It was as if in Xiao Hua's eyes, these thousands of swordsmen were just dust. "Yes, we understand." Nearly 3,000 disciples shouted in unison, and their morale immediately surged. Although Xiao Hua was only standing in midair and had only spoken a few words, His appearance was actually more powerful than any magic treasure or divine ability. Not only did the hearts of the Tao sect disciples stabilize, even the sword cultivators were somewhat afraid, and their momentum of attack actually slowed down. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.